Chapter 548. Good morning, landlord. Early in the morning, Su Xinxing woke up when he felt a familiar pressure on his abdomen. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Immerse kneeling on his abdomen in a sitting position. Say it. Don't eat while sitting on me. Su Xinxing helplessly looked at the little guy munching on the biscuits, the biscuit crumbs, sprinkling all over him. Oh! Immerse tilted her head, probably thinking that it was not good to eat while sitting on someone. So she changed to eating while standing upside down. That's even worse. Landlord, you're so capricious. Who's the capricious one? Yesterday's magnificent day finally came to an end. After returning to Earth and sending Jian Yu back to the museum, Su Xinxing went to bed without doing anything else. Even for him, it was rare for him to squeeze such a mess into a single day. Although he wasn't physically or mentally tired, for some reason, he felt mentally tired. After chasing Immerse out of bed, after washing up and brushing all the crumbs on the bed into the trash can, Immerse casually sat on the bed. Landlord, help me comb my hair. Okay. Su Xinxing was like a parent who was being pestered by a naughty child. With a gratified and helpless tone, he obediently combed Immerse's hair into a double ponytail as usual. Immerse jumped and ran 2 laps around the room, then nodded as if she was very satisfied. Big-breasted people have already prepared breakfast. Let the landlord go down and eat quickly. Big-breasted, Su Xinxing thought about it according to the size of the breasts of Sakura Apartments residents and frequent tenants. Then he felt that this girl should be talking about Songyu. So the two of them went downstairs together to prepare breakfast. After arriving at the living room, Su Xinxing found that in addition to himself, Qin Xingyan and Yu Jingjing had also arrived. The former was sitting upright at the table, while the latter had thick dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he would smash his face on the table at any time. Noticing the arrival of the two, Qin Xingyan's eyes lit up, and he greeted Su Xinxing with a sweet smile. Senior. Today, Qin Xingyan was dressed a little differently than usual. She wore a white Cheongsam-style sleeveless jacket on top, and a pair of blue denim hot pants on the bottom. She was as youthful and beautiful as usual, but at the same time, she had an indescribable mature charm. Just the two of you? Su Xinxing asked curiously. Chiketsu and Miss Chihaya are still sleeping. According to previous experience, they probably won't wake up until around 7 o'clock. Miss Sakura Kanji took Wangchan out for a walk. Based on Wangchan's physical strength, it might take her 1 or 2 hours to walk around this neighborhood several times before she comes back. Qin Xingyan replied concisely. I see. I didn't expect you to wake up so early. Su Xinxing's second half of the sentence was naturally directed at the absent-minded Yu Jingjing. I'm going back to sleep after this dinner. Yu Jingjing was like a computer with insufficient memory. After a long delay, he suddenly replied. It seemed that this guy stayed up all night to cultivate again. Is there something wrong with your biological clock? This is how our line of work works. Yu Jingjing raised his thumb. Writing novels is a dead end. After saying that, he fell on the table with a thud, and his consciousness faded away. Wasn't she a boot leveler before? Su Xinxing asked. I think it was because she felt that it was too slow to make money. Then some time ago, she saw the news of a student author earning 40,000 yuan a month, so she changed her line of work to become a web novelist. Qin Xingyan replied. Don't look down on a poor young man. Yu Jingjing, who was sleepwalking, suddenly shouted. It seemed that he was still writing in the same style as before. Su Xinxing and Qin Xingyan were speechless. At this time, Immerse, who had been waiting impatiently, began to knock on the table with his chopsticks. Fortunately, not long after, Song Yu and Dehei came out with plates to set the table. Otherwise, there might have been 288 holes in the dining table of Sakura Apartments. There were not many dishes for breakfast. They were all relatively simple things: fried eggs, bacon, fried ham, and a plate of fried golden crispy small fragrant fish. The main course was also roasted fragrant and crispy sliced bread and soft and fragrant white rice porridge. Perhaps Immerse had eaten too much yesterday, but he seemed to have lost his appetite. He was full after eating 12 slices of bread, filled with ingredients, and half a pot of porridge. Song Yu and Qin Xingyan did not eat much either. Due to the change in the nature of the latter's life, he could already abstain from eating. It was just a habit for him to eat. Therefore, Su Xinqing ate the rest of the food. During the meal, Su Xinqing even picked up a small fragrant fish for fun and stuffed it into Yu Jingjing's mouth. Yu Jingjing showed no signs of waking up at all and ate the fish in his sleep. Halfway through the meal, Qin Xingyan suddenly asked Su Xinqing, "Senpai, are you free today?" Su Xinqing thought about it casually and realized that he did not have any reservations. Although he was very interested in the world fragment, it was no different from looking for a needle in a haystack if he wanted to find other fragments on Earth. He couldn't just go up and use his cloud scale to detect if a piece of glass was a world fragment, right? So, he decided to leave it to fate. "Nothing, what's wrong? Then can you go shopping with me?" Qin Xingyan took a deep breath and then asked seriously. The bread in Song Yu's hand fell into the porridge bowl. Her face was full of shock. However, Su Xinqing, who was unaware of this, just replied, "It's not impossible, but I don't have money. Even if I like something, I can't buy it for you." "It's okay. As long as Senpai can go with me, I'll be very happy." Seeing that Su Xinqing had no intention of refusing, Qin Xingyan replied in surprise. After Song Yu and Qin Xingyan finished their breakfast absent-mindedly, Qin Xingyan and Su Xinqing went out together. Mo Li tilted her head, without any sense of nervousness. Then, she planned to go back to her room and play Super Mario Odyssey on an NES that she borrowed magic from the Earth God. However, before she could leave, Song Yu grabbed both of her shoulders. Although Mo Li could break free, because she did not feel any malice, she just curiously turned her head and looked at Song Yu, who had a bad expression on her face. "Hey, little Mo Li, aren't you curious about the itinerary after caution?" She tried to squeeze out a smile on her face and asked Mo Li. It seemed that she wanted to rope in an ally. Mo Li shook her head. She did not want to do anything right now. She just wanted to play games. "Little Mo Li, do you know that a fruit-scented roast duck restaurant opened in the south of the city recently? I heard that the sliced duck business is so good that it's sold out every day." Song Yu immediately changed the direction of her persuasion. For the landlord's physical and mental health, I have to observe him occasionally. Big breasts. Sister Song Yu, are you interested in being my assistant? My pleasure. Chapter 549. Xingyan, didn't you come out to buy something? After walking on the bustling commercial street for a long time, Su Xinqing noticed that Qin Xingyan seemed to be wandering around aimlessly, so he couldn't help but ask, "No, I just want to go shopping with you today." The girl showed a gentle smile and replied softly, "Because I suddenly realized that I've never gone shopping with you before." Su Xinqing didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that Qin Xingyan was different from before. It didn't mean that she was possessed or anything else. It was just that the girl's temperament had changed, and she had become more mature than before. Could it be that Senior is tired of it? "You don't want to come out with me?" Then, her expression became a little sad, and she asked softly. Although Su Xinqing knew that the girl was probably just pretending to be pitiful, he still felt sorry for her when she looked like she was about to cry. More importantly, there seemed to be a lot of passers-by, mainly men, around them who stopped because of the girl's expression and cast piercing glances at him, who seemed to be a heartbreaker. "Anyway, I don't have anything to do today. It doesn't matter if I accompany you all day." So Su Xinqing could only sigh, and the girl put away her sad expression and showed a bright smile. How should he put it? The moment he saw her beautiful smile, Su Xinqing actually had the feeling that it was worth running around with her all day for this smile. However, he quickly shook off this thought and continued to follow behind the happy girl. Su Xinqing didn't know what it was like for other men to go shopping with girls, but Qin Xingyan didn't seem to be interested in clothes and cosmetics. She only stopped to look at some interesting gadgets occasionally. Most of the time, she just chatted with Su Xinqing and listened to his words. The sun shone through the canopy of the sycamore trees on both sides of the commercial street, sprinkling light on the street where the two strolled. "There's actually such a thing on this street," Su Shinxing was slightly surprised when they passed by the game center named XX Animation City. Didn't you go to the game center when you were a child? Qin Xingyan asked curiously. I heard that boys like this kind of shop very much. Because my family was very poor from the beginning, Su Shinxing said with a bitter smile. It's very difficult to survive with only my father's intermittent living expenses. How could I come to this kind of place to play? Well, since that's the case, let's go in and take a look. The girl pulled Su Shinxing's arm and dragged Su Shinxing in. Senior, don't worry, it's my treat today. Since you said that. In fact, Su Shinxing, who was also a little curious, finally gave up resisting. After exiting the game center, the two began to play inside. The first was the claw machine. Isn't this clamp too loose? I can't pick it up at all. Su Shinxing, who lost several coins in a row, frowned. He suppressed the urge to slap the machine and complained. Even if you catch it, it will fall off as long as there's a little impact. It's impossible to catch it at all. This kind of machine is already like this. If you want to catch it, you need a trick. As she spoke, the girl demonstrated and successfully pinched out a domestic minion doll that looked like a bean pod. Why are you so skilled? How many times have you done this? Su Shinxing looked at Qin Xingyan in surprise. She had succeeded on her first try. Because when I first came down the mountain, I was very curious about everything. Plus, the Bailu temple's living allowance is a lot, so I usually can't spend it all. So, I secretly played with this claw machine many times. The girl smiled mischievously and winked at Su Shinxing. Remember to keep it a secret from my teacher. How should I say? I still wanted to continue playing. Su Shinxing picked up the deformed doll and scrutinized it for a moment, but when I saw that the prize was this thing, I suddenly lost my motivation. Ahaha, you want to enjoy the process, Qin Xingyan said with a smile. Then, he pulled Su Shinxing to another place. Although that's what you say, there are actually a lot of fun things in this game. For example, Resident Evil 6. What's with this knockoff name? How can it be a 6? Discovering this kind of strange game is also one of the inspirations of the trip to the game center. I say, there are really people who would spend money on such a strange game. Although old Su complained verbally, his curiosity was piqued. In the end, he spent a few coins to play the two-player mode with Qin Xingyan and successfully cleared the level. Unlike the claw machine, which required proficiency, this kind of game relied purely on reaction speed and certain controls, or backboard. For Su Shinxing, it was not too difficult because the boss's movements were like slow motion in his eyes. He had plenty of time to react. It was far worse than a real monster. After playing for a while, the two of them had accumulated a lot of game tickets. This was similar to most of the game halls in China. Game tickets could be obtained by playing the game, and the game tickets could be exchanged for prizes at the counter. If there was a difference, it was probably due to the fact that the game center was located in a bustling commercial street. There were many interesting and rather expensive items on the exchange list as prizes. The money that Su Shinxing spent, well, it was mainly Qin Xingyan's money, was actually not a lot. However, because they were able to rely on their superhuman reaction speed and physical fitness to score quite high in many games, it even caused the customers in the game center to put down the game in their hands and watch them play as if they were performing a cool game. Therefore, the game tickets that Su Shinxing obtained were quite a lot. They were hung around Su Shinxing's body a few times. As for prizes, I recommend the smart cleaning robot or the new tablet computer from Pear. If Senior isn't interested in those, a travel voucher or something like that would be good too. If you are interested in home video game consoles, you can also consider the console packages from Nintendo and Nisso. Mo Li will definitely be very happy. While Su Shinxing was still browsing through the exchange list, the girl had already made a suggestion. Is that so? Su Shinxing scanned the list back and forth a few times and finally came to his own conclusion. Please give this to me. He pointed at the list and said to the waiter. A moment later, the waiter presented the item he asked for. It was a small hairpin. The material itself was ordinary silver. The cost was not too high, but the core part was made of a few broken diamonds. If it was placed in a jewelry store, it would probably cost close to 5 digits to buy. This is for you. After receiving the hairpin, Su Xinqing handed it to Qin Xingyan. Huh, I had a lot of fun today. This is a gift in return. Well, it's more like a gift from someone else. If you like it, that would be great. Su Xinqing scratched his face and said somewhat embarrassedly, I will definitely cherish it. The girl took the hairpin and carefully held it to her chest with both hands. Even if the world turns upside down and the rivers and seas flow backwards, I won't let it suffer the slightest bit of harm. The girl trembled slightly and hid her tears of joy in her hair. Her face was filled with a blush that could make people melt. That's too much, Su Xinqing complained helplessly. And it's already noon. Let's go eat. Okay, Qin Xingyan said with a voice full of energy. Senior, just tell me what you want to eat, of course. It's still my treat. Why do I feel like I'm living off a woman? Chapter 550. Oh, no matter how you look at it, it's still a date. On the commercial street, Song Yu hid behind a lamppost and looked at the two people talking and laughing not too far away. Her face was full of unwillingness. To be honest, this kind of clumsy concealment that looked like something out of a comedy movie was completely useless. If it wasn't for the fact that Mo had set up a barrier to reduce their presence, they would have been discovered by the two people in front of them a long time ago. Ah, they've entered the gaming center. Mo, let's follow them. Oh, thus, the two people sneakily followed them. Because of Mo's interest, Song Yu exchanged some game coins for the little guy to play by himself, while she continued to secretly observe Su Xinqing and the others. They actually have this trick up their sleeve. I also want to play games intimately with Xinqing. Seeing the two people squeezed in front of the same screen to play the cooperative game, Resident Evil 6, and occasionally looking at each other and smiling because of their tacit understanding, Song Yu's unwillingness grew even stronger. It was as if a dark cloud had appeared above her head. Compared to a resentful woman, she was only lacking a handkerchief to bite. While she was lost in thought, Emoli was alone behind her, playing the stage jump game. A series of perfect scores were constantly being refreshed on the screen. If it wasn't for the fact that no one was paying attention to them due to their presence being reduced, the scene of the dancing blonde loli, with two ponytails, continuously updating the highest score in the game would probably attract more spectators than Su Xinqing and the others. He even gave her a token of love. In the end, when Su Xinqing gave the broken diamond hair accessory to Qin Xingyan at the counter, Song Yu's whole body finally went OTZ. Her whole body turned gray as if she had been burned out. My final advantage is, Emoli also went OTZ with her. Two cartoonish teardrops hung from the corners of the little guy's eyes, and his golden ponytails drooped powerlessly to the ground like his master. He pouted and muttered to himself in a fit of pique. My game console. Although it was very strange for two beautiful girls, one big and one small, to bend forward in frustration, it was also unexpectedly pleasing to the eye. It was a pity that no one noticed. Lunchtime. Although it was Qin Xingyan's treat, Su Xinqing was not the kind of person who would shamelessly eat a big meal just because of other people's situation. In the end, he just randomly chose a rice noodle shop to solve the problem of lunch. Su Xinqing, who did not care about his table manners, ate like a whirlwind. Qin Xingyan, who had become a celestial, did not need to eat to fill his stomach. He stopped eating after tasting the food for a while. Therefore, the two quickly finished eating and began their afternoon date. They're starting to move again. Emoli, we need to catch up. Because the enemy's situation this morning was too big, Song Yu, who didn't have much of an appetite, didn't eat much. On the other hand, Emoli recovered quickly. Now, there were 3 empty bowls on the table. Tell me if you haven't finished eating. Jasmine, hurry up and think about that game console that you missed so much. Also, do you know, the fruit-scented roast duck goes well with the duck rack soup. I've recently learned how to make the delicious duck rack soup. Leave it to me. Thus, the little guy immediately made a solemn vow and patted his chest that did not move up and down, and said confidently, with the little girl's help, they once again caught up with the two people. Perhaps because Su Xinqing and Qin Xingyan did not have the talent and experience for dating, the afternoon was still the same as before. However, compared to Su Shenqing's boredom in the morning and Qin Xingyan's restraint in the afternoon, the two seemed to be more harmonious in the afternoon. For example, Qin Xingyan could already take Su Shenqing to some small jewelry stores with more young women without any scruples. It would be great if we could hear what they're saying. Emily, do you have any ideas? Wait, you can't eat that. By the time Song Yu took the saliva-stained perfume from Emily's mouth, Su Shenqing and Qin Xingyan had already left the store. In the end, Song Yu had to spend money to buy the bottle of orange-scented perfume so that she could continue to follow Su Shenqing with Emily. Are you worried that the landlord will be taken away? After continuing to follow for more than half an hour, Emily finally seemed to be a little bored and suddenly asked Song Yu. Song Yu originally wanted to deny it out of modesty as an Asian woman, but she remained silent without saying anything. That girl Xingyan clearly said before that she wouldn't do such a thing deliberately. After a while, she slowly said, "When I confessed to Shenqing, she didn't show any extreme reaction. So, for her to suddenly do such a thing, if you want to say that she's unwilling, ugh, don't look at me like that. I admit that I'm extremely unwilling, but more than that, I'm still a little worried about her current situation. If that's the case, can't you just ask her directly?" Emily asked again. "Sometimes I really envy you, Emily. You don't have anything to worry about, and you're always so straightforward. Emily, you're so good at knocking. I feel like you're infringing on my rights in some way." Song Yu ridiculed. She then revealed a determined smile. "But you're right. Maybe it's time to clarify things with her face to face." "Ugh, that's why I said don't look at me like that. I admit that I also want to mess up their date." The meeting went unexpectedly smoothly. Emily slightly removed a portion of the existence-weakening barrier, and Song Yu personally made an inviting gesture to Qin Xingyan. After a moment, Qin Xingyan used some kind of excuse to get Su Shenqing to sit on a bench on the side of the street, while he ran into the alley to meet up with Song Yu. "Song Yu Sr., why are you and Emily here? Although I really want to ask, I'm pretty sure you've been following us since the beginning, right?" The girl sighed. "Since you've guessed it, I won't hide anymore." Song Yu immediately went straight to the point. "I want to know what happened. You weren't such a proactive person in the past, were you? If I have to say something, it's that my mentality has changed a little." Qin Xingyan was silent for a moment, then slowly said, "Did you know, I almost died yesterday?" Because Song Yu was still a normal person. She didn't know what happened yesterday. I originally thought that I could disregard life and death. If I could die for Senior, I would die without regrets. Qin Xingyan said with a bitter smile. But when death really came in front of me, I realized that I was actually so timid, and that I still had so many attachments to this world. Song Yu was silent, and quietly listened to him continue. "At that moment, I missed the little sparrow I saw when I was a child. I felt guilty for not being able to make any decent contributions to the sect. I also thought of the few friends I had at school, Senior's delicious dishes. At that moment, I thought of a lot of things, and even the little things I usually had became precious. But there's only one thing I regret the most. Why couldn't I muster up the courage like you, and work hard to take a step forward, and become an important person to Senior?" Qin Xingyan's smile showed a hint of self-mockery. It wasn't until then that I realized that I was actually such a greedy and despicable person, even though I always kept telling myself that as long as I stayed by Senior's side, no matter what, it didn't matter. But at that moment, I took off all the pretense and saw my true feelings. I want to be the most important person to Senior, and I don't want to share Senior's heart with anyone else. If one day I can become the mistress of Sakura Apartments as a family member instead of a tenant, that should be the happiest thing in my life. It's because I understand all of this that I'm completely different from yesterday. To be honest, Song Yu sighed. If it were any other girl, I would probably think that she watched too many romance movies and was too hypocritical. I'm sorry. Qin Xingyan was at a loss as to what to do and apologized. But I know very well that your words are sincere. Then Song Yu took a deep breath. I understand. Your Excellency's declaration of war. I've received it. A smile full of confidence appeared on her face. Senior, Qin Xingyan seemed to be a little confused. I'll say in advance that I won't back down. I've known for a long time that my only enemy is you. So let's fight fair and square, and use all our strength to fight to our heart's content. Although I'm not as helpful as you in terms of supernatural abilities to that guy, I'm still confident in my female strength. The spoils of war have already been decided, haven't they? Facing Song Yu's outstretched hand, Qin Xingyan hesitated for a moment. Then, the confusion on her face disappeared, and a faint blush appeared on the girl's face, and an intoxicating smile appeared on her face. Yes, she held Song Yu's hand tightly. Okay, I can't lose to you in the first round. I'll let you have the morning, then leave the afternoon to me. Too much. Today is clearly my date with Senior. But when they ran out of the alley, they were dumbfounded. Su Xinqing was nowhere to be seen on the bench. How should I put it? If it was another guy, I'd probably think he stood me up. For some reason, Qin Xingyan sighed. But if it was Senior? Yes, he's probably involved in something strange again. Song Yu had a similar complicated expression. Then, their eyes converged on Mo Li, who was not far away from them, buying pastries. Mo Li turned around and found that the two of them were staring at her strangely. She recalled that Su Xinqing had once taught her how to deal with various situations when she encountered them. So, she held the bag full of pastries in her left hand, curled her right hand into a cat's claw, and her blonde hair also stood up, with two pointed cat ears under her control. The little girl herself was expressionless and cute. Meow, Senior. I'm suddenly very worried about Senior's teaching methods. What a coincidence, me too. In the end, Qin Xingyan and Song Yu reached a consensus on this strange matter. Go ahead. Mo Li tilted her head in confusion, and her face also showed a cute, puzzled expression. Chapter 551. Qin Xingyan's guess was correct, because Su Xinqing was indeed involved in trouble. When Qin Xingyan left, she used the excuse of going to the toilet. Although old Su knew that this girl didn't need to go to the toilet, which ancient book would record that immortals needed to go to the toilet, this didn't stop him from understanding that she had something to do. And in the end, although Mo Li's magic was effective on him, he could vaguely sense that something was wrong. So in the end, Su Xinqing didn't stop the other party. He just muttered, I feel like I'm going to be known as a freeloader. While eating Qin Xingyan's barbecue skewers, he waited for the other party by the roadside. Logically speaking, for most male compatriots, barbecue skewers were usually a matter of 1 or 2 minutes. Plus, old Su was a bit of a clean freak, so after eating the barbecue skewers, he looked around for a long time before he found a small alley with a few green moving trash cans. So he went to the alley to throw the bamboo skewers. If it was before, he only needed to throw the skewers from outside the alley. But recently, he had lost control of his strength. It would be bad if the skewers broke through the trash cans, the floor tiles, and the foundation of the building next to it. But at this moment, something fell from the sky. At first, Su Xinqing subconsciously thought that it was a cloud falling down, but then he realized that what he saw was a fluttering white skirt. Su Xinqing even caught a glimpse of a piece of pure white cotton triangular cloth in the soft, cloud-like hemline of the dress. Then the person fell to the ground with a thud. Ouch, ouch, ouch. I thought you would definitely catch me. Sure enough, the behavior of the divergent is completely unpredictable. The other party rubbed his buttocks and showed a teary expression. No, except for the male protagonists in light novels. Under normal circumstances, no one would catch a person falling from the sky, right? From a more malicious perspective, wouldn't the first reaction when seeing someone jumping off a building be to run away first to prevent the other party from falling on their buttocks? Although for Su Xinqing, even if a piece of meteorite fell on him, he wouldn't be the one injured in the end. The one who fell from the sky was a girl. She had a head of long, snow-white hair that Su Xinqing often saw in the other world. It was not the gorgeous silver hair that Su Xinqing often saw. Instead, it was pure white hair that did not have a trace of impurities, like that of an old person. If she was an ordinary woman, she wouldn't look good with a head full of frost, because this kind of hair color wouldn't match her young face. But for some reason, the young girl, at least she looked like a young girl, didn't have that kind of incongruous feeling. Instead, she gave off a delicate beauty, but for some reason, she kept her eyes closed. However, Su Shinxing heard something else from the other party's words. Anomaly. He narrowed his eyes and repeated the part of the girl's words that caught his attention. Back in Kunlun. That was what Bai Zhe had called the world fragment he had found. Ah, haven't you noticed? Why is it that the 2 times you've met that legendary monster, the only thing it said to you was specious? Why does it have an almost omniscient ability, but it doesn't tell you the whereabouts of the thing it's currently looking for? Su Shinxing's mutterings were without rhyme or reason, but the young girl seemed to know what he meant. She raised her head slightly, looked in Su Shinxing's direction, and said everything like she was spilling beans. After hearing what she said, Su Shinxing realized that Bai Zhe's attitude towards him was indeed a bit strange. The first time, it was okay. At least it gave Su Shinxing the Haotian mirror that he used to travel through time. The second time, it was no different from a charlatan. The reason is very simple, because for her, no, it should be for all the diviners and prophets in this world. You are the biggest anomaly in the world. The girl, who still didn't open her eyes, said slowly, "Who are you?" Probably because the other party showed a very familiar look towards him. Until now, Su Shinxing realized that he didn't know the other party at all. "Just call me the legendary girl, eh?" The other party said proudly for some reason. "What the hell?" Su Shinxing complained with an embarrassed face. "Because if I tell you my real name, doesn't it mean that I may also become a happy member of the Savior's harem? What the hell is that mysterious group that makes people full of the desire to complain?" While talking, Su Shinxing found that the girl had unknowingly opened her eyes. Just like her hair and dress, her eyes were also white. However, that kind of white was not only different from the white of the eyes, but also different from the slightly uncomfortable white of cataracts. The girl's pupils seemed to have an indescribable dense air flowing slowly. Not only was it not ugly, but it also had a kind of extraordinarily deep and lively feeling. However, Su Shinxing keenly noticed that the other party's eyes seemed to be unfocused, and he couldn't feel her line of sight. "Your eyes? Oh, I'm a blind person." The girl said happily, "Your tone is too cheerful. I can't feel a trace of sympathy at all. Because I don't want to be pitied." "Oh no." At this point, the girl's face suddenly showed an expression of something bad. She grabbed Su Shinxing's hand. Her accurate and capable movements made it impossible for people to believe that she was blind. "Anyway, it's not easy to escape from the room. Let's run away first." "What the hell are you doing? What kind of development is this?" While talking, Su Shinxing also found that it seemed that some people were rushing toward the alley, but he didn't feel any hostility from those people. Instead, they were full of anxiety and panic. It seemed that the girl was not kidnapped, but was close to the feeling of a rich family's daughter on a trip. "It's not easy to get a chance to come out and bask in the sun. I don't want to be disturbed by those big idiots." The other party said righteously. "So what does this have to do with me?" Su Shinxing asked in astonishment. "I know what you're looking for, and I also know where it is. If you can help me get through this difficulty, I'll tell you where it is." The other party said with a sly smile as she pulled Su Shinxing's hand forward. "I feel like I've been dragged around all day. Wait. At least let me send a text to Xingyan." Because the other party was afraid of hurting the delicate-looking girl, our protagonist was dragged out of the alley before he could finish his sentence. Chapter 552. Originally, Su Shinxing thought that his hesitation at the beginning would give the girl's bodyguards a chance to catch them, although it was useless except for giving old Su a face-slapping plot that could be used for 1 or 2 chapters. However, after being pulled by the girl for a while, the breath of the bodyguards disappeared. He didn't know if they had been shaken off. "Phew! I can't run anymore. Sister, we have only run less than a kilometer. That's because I used to be locked up in the basement all by myself. The most exercise I did was just eating with chopsticks in my hand. Instead of saying that you are a lady, you are more like a sex prisoner, right?" Su Shinxing complained. "Ah, you just wanted to say beep slave, right? It's beep, right?" The girl's cheeks suddenly puffed up like a roasted rice cake, and she lost her temper without any deterrence. "A girl shouldn't say that kind of word on the street." Su Shinxing, whose scalp was numb by the stares of the surrounding onlookers, said helplessly. Anyway, I can't run anymore, and I'm going to die. Tomorrow, I will definitely have muscle pain because of the exercise. Just how weak are you? Su Xinqing sighed. Do you want me to carry you? Men and women should not touch each other. Only at this time. Your self-esteem is bursting. Su Xinqing muttered in his heart. It was you who took the initiative to hold my hand. I hope my prince can pick me up on a colorful, auspicious cloud. The girl sat down on the bench on the side of the road and said, exhausted. You are asking for too much. Su Xinqing thought for a while and found that none of the supermen around him could raise a colorful, auspicious cloud. The only one who was somewhat close to it, Brother Long, could only raise a rain cloud. If you really can't do it, a bicycle will do. It dropped so low all of a sudden. Su Xinqing complained, although he didn't even have a bicycle. By the way, no one is chasing you now. Can you tell me what you said before? Of course not. With her hands on her hips, the girl looked at the lamppost next to Su Xinqing with unfocused eyes and refused without hesitation. You see, if what happened between us is considered as a novel, then from the time we met until now, I'm afraid it's less than 2,000 words, right? What does this have to do with me? Su Xinqing said in his heart. Ah, you must be thinking. F*CK. This B*TCH is talking about a F*King relationship with me, right? Young girl, your inner drama is too rich. Su Xinqing refused to admit that the other party had guessed 80% of the content. All in all, because our communication process is too short, if I tell you all the important information at once, wouldn't I become a strange character who doesn't know anything? The girl continued to speak confidently to the fire hydrant next to the lamppost. Because this scene was too funny, Su Xinqing even began to wonder if this guy was deliberately doing something funny. No. Actually, I think you're already confused enough. Is that so? Before I snuck out this time, I did some research on the trending slogans on the internet. The other party revealed a shocked expression. I don't think this has anything to do with slogans. Hey Gigi, what are you talking about? Don't tell me you also know how to surf the internet? What a coincidence, I'm also a slogan. Hey, what era did you research on slogans from? Heavenly Kingdom's Jasmine, I, your landlord, seem to be stuck by something strange. Whether it's the fragmented cherry blossoms dancing in the night sky like fine snow, or the moon in the night sky that wants to speak but hesitates, please come and fulfill my wish. In the karaoke room, Su Xinqing looked like he had nothing left to live for as he slapped the tambourine on the sofa, while the girl held the microphone and sang in high spirits. To be honest, the girl's voice was very good. Although it was a bit sharp, it was as clean and clear as a clear spring. Plus, she wasn't the type of person who could sing out of tune from the Mariana Trench to Mount Everest, so her voice was quite good. Unfortunately, Old Su's musical ability was average, so he couldn't hear anything. Plus, this small room was extremely noisy, and he paid for the room, which made his mood even worse. Previously, he took out his phone and wanted to send a message to Qin Xingyan, who he stood up, but when he came out, he realized that his phone had run out of battery. Thus, he could only patiently accompany the legendary girl while praying that Qin Xingyan wouldn't cause any trouble because he couldn't find him. This possibility was quite low, because in a sense, Qin Xingyan could be considered as the last conscience of Sakura apartment. La 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 la. When Su Xinqing came back to his senses, he realized that the other party was no longer singing the lyrics, but had changed to la 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 la. Is it really okay to be so perfunctory? You were the one who wanted to sing. Because I forgot the lyrics. How can you say that so confidently? Aren't there lyrics on the screen? Because I'm blind. The girl turned around, held the microphone in her left hand, and made a Kira gesture with her right hand. Unfortunately, because the angle wasn't right, this flirtatious look was thrown directly at the jukebox next to Su Xinqing, who had a determined face the whole time. Is that really the case? Su Xinqing raised his eyebrows suspiciously. To be honest, although the girl's eyes were indeed out of focus, and it felt like she wasn't using her visual function, from her every move, except for the occasional stupidity, she was no different from a normal person most of the time. That's right. I can live like a normal person because I can feel things that are more real. The girl wasn't angry at Su Shenxing's suspicions. Instead, she explained with a smile. After all, I've been used to it since I was young. It doesn't matter even if I can't see things now. Speaking of this, she also stretched out her right hand and made a V gesture to Su Shenxing, who was drinking water, and said, "Well, because of this, I have a bounty on the Darknet's black market. If you can kidnap me, you can get 200 million, and it's in US dollars. Even if it's just a corpse, it's still 50 million. Suddenly, Su Shenxing spat out the water. No wonder she was locked in the basement. Generally, if someone had a treasure worth 200 million, they would definitely put it in a safe place like the basement for safekeeping. At this time, someone knocked on the door of the private room. Oh, the snacks I ordered are here." The girl happily ran to the door. "Hey, when did you order something to eat?" "When you weren't looking." The girl happily opened the door, but what appeared in front of her was a black muzzle. Chapter 553. Before the girl realized that the person in front of her was not a waiter, the person in the waiter's uniform had already pulled the trigger. The bullet shot at the girl, who was caught off guard at a speed faster than the speed of sound. However, almost at the next moment, the bullet suddenly stopped in midair, going from a high speed to a standstill. Then, it shot back into the barrel of the pistol at 3 times the speed. Because the whole process was less than 0.1 seconds, neither the girl nor the assassin could react at all. Then, almost as if it was a matter of course, the pistol's barrel exploded just like that. The assassin was blasted into a bloody mess, covered in blood and half dead as he leaned against the corridor wall, and then slowly slid to the ground. Oh, obviously, she was being assassinated, but the girl's face was full of surprise. She turned her head, dense air swirling in her eyes. "Is that the ward?" "You can see it." This time, it was Su Shenxing's turn to be a little surprised. Yes, after all, the enemy this time was a fragile human. Because he did not want to see too much of a strange death, Su Shenxing did not intend to do it himself, but just at the moment when the assassin pulled the trigger, he cast a ward of retaliation on the girl. It was a defensive ward that could double the enemy's attack. Su Shenxing used this ward to play rebound, rebound, rebound again, rebound your rebound, with a demon king in a certain lattice world who was proficient in rebounding magic. It was a battle routine that was like a primary school quarrel. "I can't see it at all," the girl said proudly for some reason. "Because I'm blind." "Is that something to be proud of?" "But—" The girl lowered her eyes, her long eyelashes casting dense shadows on her fair face under the dim ceiling light of the KTV. "It's vaguely understandable. In order to obtain this power that surpasses common sense." The girl's eyes were clearly unfocused, but Su Shenxing had a feeling that she was looking at him. She said softly, "What price did you pay?" Su Shenxing fell into a rare silence. After a long time, he said, "If you don't call the ambulance, that guy will die." So you care about the life and death of a mere human? You don't show any mercy when killing monsters? Monsters have no human rights." Su Shenxing said firmly. To be honest, he did not care about the life and death of the assassin. But if someone died in such a lively place, it would be more or less troublesome to suppress the matter. Monsters were different. If Xiao Jingyi was still here, then the best choice would be to hand the assassin over to him. But the problem was that the guy was still lying in a hospital bed. Although a lot of things had happened, according to the normal timeline, only a day had passed since Su Shenxing went to see him. Even if Xiao Jingyi's body recovered faster than normal people because he bathed in more spiritual energy, he did not have the blood of the Nami star. If he wanted to completely recover, he would need to recuperate for a period of time. Besides him, Su Shenxing did not know anyone else in the Jiangjin police station. Just as he was still distressed, an acquaintance appeared at the corner of the corridor. "Long time no see, Mr. Su." The other person nodded slightly to show respect. "Let me handle this guy. From the meaning of your name, you are also Mr. Su, right?" Su Shenxing sighed. "Didn't you get promoted to Tianjing? Why did you come back to Jiangjin?" The person who came was naturally the former director of Jiangjin's super administrative office, Su Feng. Of course, it's because there was a big mess in Jiangjin. Even that brat Xiaojingyi was hospitalized. I had no choice but to come over and replace him. Su Feng sighed. The other reason is the guy in front of you. Sure enough. It's not that easy to escape from the hands of the mechanism. The legendary girl A had a serious expression. She took out a phone and placed it next to her ear. Using a very soft voice that Su Xinqing and Su Feng could clearly hear, she said, Hey, that's right, it's me. I'm being monitored by the mechanism, but it doesn't matter. Now we're going to execute the third backup plan. I wish you all good luck, El Sai Congro. My phone, when did you take it? Su Xinqing frowned and said, Also, it ran out of battery a long time ago. Why did you call? Great Master Yun, please don't do this kind of strange childish action again. The officials at the Imperial Astronomers' headquarters are already unhappy with your previous behavior of running away. They even issued a letter of accountability. Su Feng said to the girl with a wry smile. The girl threw the phone back to Su Xinqing. Then she pulled the corner of her mouth and made a face at Su Feng. Although Su Xinqing could only see the girl's back because of the angle and couldn't see the face, from Su Feng's mixed helpless smile and voice that made people want to beat him up, he knew that the face was definitely very interesting. If you're with Mr. Su, then I can reluctantly accept the security. Considering that you really haven't come out for a breath of fresh air in a long time, it's fine to let you play for a while. But please don't forget your identity. At night, I'll come and pick you up. In the end, the confrontation between the two ended with Su Feng's concession. The password is 123456. The rest of the money will be Mr. Su's reward. He put a bank card on the table and then waved his hand. A few men dressed like super black special police came out from the shadows and carried the assassin away. And Su Feng also saluted the girl and left in big strides. What did you say you'll pick me up when it's dark? Isn't it already dinner time? The girl said angrily. Isn't that good? Su Xinqing had an indifferent expression. He picked up the bank card. After dinner, remember to tell me everything I want to know. Wow, is this how you treat the beautiful girl who accompanied you the whole afternoon so coldly? I'm just coldly treating the guy who wasted my afternoon. Damn it, I want to go to the top floor of Jiangjin's fashion building for a luxurious meal. Do you know? There's a saying in this world called the experts among the people. Su Xinqing seriously suggested. So why don't we go eat at a food stall? I know a place that has a really good food stall. Jiangjin's fashion building. Although it was called a building, it was actually a tower-shaped building that imitated the Oriental Pearl Tower. Although it couldn't be compared to the real thing, the entire building was about 300 meters tall. In addition, it had a very fashionable appearance, so it had vaguely become one of Jiangjin's landmarks. The most fascinating place was the luxurious restaurant at the top of the fashion building. It was said that the lowest cost there was 5 figures. It was definitely not an exaggeration to say that a single meal would cost a normal person a month's salary. However, such a high price still couldn't stop people's footsteps. After all, this era didn't lack rich people and people who wanted to pretend to be rich. In addition, there was a metaphysical saying that the success rate of eating here with a blind date is higher, which caused a lot of couples and prospective couples to flood in. Are you kidding me? Boiled cabbage actually costs a few hundred yuan? You must be kidding me. When he saw the menu, Su Xinqing was shocked. Usually, he was the one who reshaped other people's worldview. But today, his worldview was on the verge of collapse. A dish that cost more than 2,000 yuan, and it was seafood, was far beyond his common sense. That's the famous Sichuan dish, boiled cabbage, okay. The girl pretended to look at the menu and complained in a low voice. I don't believe that this thing is much better than boiled mandrake. Isn't mandrake poison? The girl muttered. No, I mean the kind that grows into a human shape and cries when pulled out of the ground. Nonsense, this snail is more expensive than the meat of a rainbow dragon, because it's a famous French dish. Wait, dragon meat? Oh my God, the price of foie gras can buy a lot of geese. The more Su Xinqing looked at him, the more he felt that he was not suitable to come to such a place. Fortunately, he also knew that it was not a good thing for him to act like a country bumpkin, so he spoke softly. Otherwise, he would have attracted the attention of the surrounding people. Even the waiter who helped them order could not help but show a look of disdain on his face. However, when the French dishes were served, Su Xinqing's etiquette became very authentic. Without considering his t-shirt and beach pants, he looked like a noble who was eating elegantly. After all, many of the worlds that old Su had transmigrated to were more fantasy worlds, where the Western noble's etiquette, or something similar, was not out of date. Plus, as a hero, it was normal for him to participate in some grand royal ceremonies. Over time, he became familiar with such etiquette. It was just that he usually did not use it. Therefore, the waiter who was full of disdain was so surprised that his jaw almost dropped. This is the first time I've spent 5 figures on a meal. After dinner, Su Xinqing still had a look of lingering fear. If Su Feng did not leave behind a bank card with 100,000 yuan in it before he left, he would have to think about how to wash away his image of a dine-in dash. The ingredients in this restaurant are just SOSO. The girl pursed her lips and seemed to be a little dissatisfied as she commented. To this, Su Xinqing just rolled his eyes. After dinner, the two took the sightseeing elevator to the top of the Zhongjin Fashion Building, which was a spherical structure. This was actually a place equivalent to a lookout. From here, one could almost overlook the entire Zhongjin. At this time, other than Su Xinqing and his group, there were also a few people who seemed to be lovers gathered together in 2s and 3s. Although Su Xinqing used to overlook Zhongjin City from other buildings when he was in the military, compared to here, it was clear that the shock from those places was much weaker. The sky had completely darkened, and the bright moon in the east was hanging in the pitch-black night sky. Only a few sparse stars accompanied it in the night sky. Instead, it was replaced by the bright river on the ground that flowed endlessly. "Aren't you blind?" Su Xinqing looked at the girl whose entire face was almost stuck to the glass and laughed. "But I can use my heart to see. Or rather, the scene that I can see is definitely more beautiful than what you can see." A faint smile appeared on the girl's face. It was completely different from her crazy appearance all day, and it made people's hearts beat faster. "Is that so? Of course. I can see the process of this city gradually changing from a small fishing village to what it is now. Many fascinating stories happened one after another on this land like bamboo shoots after the rain. They overcame one difficulty after another and thrived, and finally became the lush bamboo forest called Zhongjin." The girl said softly, "Although there was sadness, disappointment, pain, and chaos, it is because we have overcome all of this that we can now see such a beautiful scene." Speaking up to here, she suddenly stopped, and a lonely expression appeared on her face. The next moment, the special glass that the girl was leaning on was suddenly full of cracks, and then it exploded into countless small glass shards that wouldn't hurt people because of special treatment. And because the glass that supported most of the weight of the girl's body collapsed, her body involuntarily leaned forward, and she fell out of the watchtower from a height of more than 300 meters into the night sky. It was a substitute attack. No, it was a terrorist attack. Su Xinqing didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the girl seemed to have a relieved expression before she fell out. But he didn't have time to think too much. He took 3 steps in 2, jumped out of the gap, and chased after the girl. Galileo once told us that under the same external conditions, the acceleration of 2 objects falling from the same height would be the same regardless of their weight. So in theory, Su Xinqing couldn't catch up with the girl. Although there was also the option of increasing speed by changing his movements to reduce air resistance, Su Xinqing wouldn't be Su Xinqing if he was bound by the mere laws of physics. He gathered cloud scales behind his back, and then suddenly burst out, causing his falling speed to increase by several times. So he finally caught up with the girl and hugged her in his arms. How delightful. The situation was obviously urgent, but the girl in his arms still had time to smile. She said, "Finally, I guessed correctly for once, Mr. Anomaly." Chapter 554. After all, I took that guy's money, and if I let you get killed so easily, wouldn't that be very embarrassing? Su Xinqing adjusted his body position, then stomped hard in midair, slowing down his falling speed by stepping on the air. Wow, the word kill sounds so perverted, Mr. Savior. You're the one who's perverted. As Su Shenqing complained, he waved his left hand in the air. His index finger and middle finger caught a bullet in the same way as a cigarette. Even if Su Shenqing didn't have much knowledge about modern weapons, he could probably guess that this thing should be a bullet from a large-caliber sniper rifle. Although old Su has been back in this world for nearly 4 years, this incident was the first time he officially fought against people with modern weapons. The previous enemies were either monsters with supernatural powers or aliens with planet destroyer spaceships. And among the more than 9,000 lattice worlds, there has never been a world similar to Earth. Even the most similar types were more or less different, which made Su Shenqing feel very out of character when he fought in those worlds. So in fact, it was quite refreshing for him. It seems that there are a lot of people who want to kill you. With this thought in mind, he was still in the mood to tease the girl. Because for some countries and organizations that need to block technology or information in Huaxia, my ability is still quite troublesome. The girl tried to push her long hair away from her face, but unfortunately, the strong wind made it impossible for her to do so. Speaking of which, what is your ability? Foresight? According to Su Shenqing's understanding of the so-called assassins through movies and literature, after missing a shot, the other party should directly escape. However, he didn't know if the other party was determined to kill the girl, but there was more than one assassin. During the process of falling, the two were shot several times. At first, Su Shenqing was interested in changing the speed of their fall by stepping on the air to avoid the bullets, or simply brushing the bullets away with his hand. But after several times, he simply covered the girl with cloud scales to prevent her from being shot because of his negligence. Judging from the fact that the enemy sniper was able to accurately shoot the two falling girls at high speed, and the fact that their falling trajectory was a mess because of Su Shenqing's actions, the enemy sniper was probably not an ordinary person. To be honest, although on the surface, the girl's escape from home seemed to be smooth sailing, and she didn't encounter any major accidents from beginning to end, Su Shenqing knew that this was most likely because of him. After the girl's protectors found out that she was using Su Shenqing's tiger skin, even if the girl herself was important, countless situations in the past had proven to them that Su Shenqing was a person who could be persuaded by reason, but not by force. If they dared to use force against Su Shenqing, the next moment, the imperial astronomer under the jurisdiction of the Super Administrative Office would probably turn from a mysterious organization of national power into a brand of fresh meat mooncakes. If it was an ordinary man, he would most likely be tied up and dragged into a van by a group of mysterious men in black to be brainwashed a few seconds after meeting the girl. If he was unlucky, he might even forget some other things, such as his sexual orientation and so on. In the face of such a situation, the enemy still dared to assassinate the girl. Judging from their thorough preparation, even if the girl didn't run away from home, they would have done everything they could to kill her in Jiangjin. It could be said that they had already thrown caution to the wind and didn't plan to leave Jiangjin alive. Unfortunately, that's not right. The girl giggled. She wasn't worried that she had a brush with death. Perhaps she also felt that even if the Grim Reaper really came looking for her, she was afraid that the young man beside her would mercilessly strip off her black cloak, snatch away her scythe, and make her into a bone specimen to sell to the school or something. With a heavy thud, Su Shenqing, who had changed his posture into a princess carry, finally landed on the ground successfully. The surrounding cement floor was directly smashed into a crater full of cracks by this huge force, and when this impact was fed back to Su Shenqing's body, it was absorbed by his cloud scale. Otherwise, even if the girl didn't die from the shock, she would have suffered a concussion or something. My ability is clairvoyance. The girl seemed to have not noticed Su Shenqing's behavior at all. Her arms hooked around Su Shenqing's neck as she spoke with a sweet smile. Unexpectedly, you're so low. Su Shenqing began to wonder if this girl had a sister called Clairaudient. Although she's not my sister, Clairaudient does exist. She really does exist. Su Shenqing first subconsciously ridiculed, but then he frowned. He didn't seem to have subconsciously said Clairaudient just now. This is the power of clairvoyance. I can see, A lot of information that can't be seen with the naked eye. The only uncomfortable thing is that this ability isn't completely controllable. Although I can now use this power to see some specific things, such as some technical information that the higher-ups want to know. Let me tell you, I've participated in the research and development of a lot of black technology in the Celestial Empire in the past 10 years. But more often than not, it will give me a lot of messy things, which gives me a headache. Oh. What kind of reaction is this? You're too cold. The girl reached out and pinched Su Xinqing's face. Hey, you actually have stubble. Your focus is really strange. Su Xinqing raised his head and avoided the girl's mischievous hand. Compared to this, why didn't those killers continue to attack when we didn't move? They've been caught by the secret forces of the Imperial Astronomer. The girl said proudly. Do you think they won't notice with such a big commotion? That's true. It's fine if it's the general police, but a special force like this shouldn't be late every time. When Su Xinqing thought of this, the girl had already struggled out of his hand and jumped to the ground. Today is about to end. The girl's face showed a somewhat lonely smile. She stretched out her hands behind her back and ran a few steps forward. I'm going to become the princess of the tower again. Su Xinqing thought about it, but still didn't know if he should comfort the other party. Don't worry, I'm very trustworthy. Not knowing if she misunderstood Su Xinqing's silence, the girl turned around. The colorful neon lights in the Jiangji night flickered behind her. Her pupils were still as deep as the sky, and there was an equally beautiful, gentle smile on her beautiful face. What do you want to know? I'll tell you now. Chapter 555. Master Yun, please spare a thought for me once in a while. Although it was not yet deep into the night, Jiangjin was already completely shrouded by the curtain of night. Su Feng walked under the streetlight and helplessly complained to the girl in front of him. If anything happens to you, the unlucky one is me. Yes, when the time comes, please use your faith and perseverance to overcome it. The girl replied without hesitation. I can't do it. Please don't make it sound as easy as being constipated to be captured by the secret forces of the Imperial Astronomer. Su Feng replied with an embarrassed face. Commander Su. The girl stopped in her tracks, but she did not turn around. She only said in a clear voice, What orders do you have? Su Feng replied reflexively, I think it's better to eat more bananas. I'm just making an analogy. I'm not really constipated. Suddenly, Su Feng's face became as ugly as being constipated, but the girl did not seem to hear his complaints and continued to walk forward. Su Feng hurriedly followed. Although there were a lot of people arranged by the Imperial Astronomer to be on guard, to be honest, Su Feng did not think that they would be of any use in the face of a world-class assassination master. Other than the ambushing Antares, he could only rely on himself. Every time this happened, Su Feng always felt that the super administrative office was not strong enough. If he could recruit the guardian of Jiangjin, he would not have to worry so much. Su Feng could not help but have a stomachache when he thought about how the young lady in front of him had approached the young man, who was classified as a level 12 red secret in the super administrative office's internal archives without permission. Although there was no trouble, allowing this young lady to run around was already a big sin. He reckoned that even if he was able to return to the super administrative office headquarters to report his work, he would most likely be scolded badly even if he was not demoted by a rank. Speaking of which, what did you say to that gentleman in the end? Why did I see that he seemed to be very surprised? Perhaps Su Feng felt that the journey was too boring, so he asked. As for why the two of them wanted to walk on the road, it was naturally not because the super administrator was so poor that they couldn't even afford a car. Instead, it was because the girl herself had requested, I want to bask in the moonlight. Considering that her emotions would have a considerable impact on her ability, Su Feng could only agree to this slightly excessive request. Do you think that if it was something meaningful to the super administrator, I would deliberately avoid your monitoring? It's fine if it's meaningless. It's also a human's natural desire to be gossipy. Su Feng said unyieldingly. Yes, what I'm most afraid of is that after you satisfy your desire for gossip, your life will also flow away like water. F*CK. It's so important that he'll be silenced. Hee. Different from when she was with Su Shinching, the girl now ended the topic unreasonably. Then can you tell me, the purpose of your escape this time was only to see that Su Shinching? Therefore, Su Feng, who was unwilling to give up, changed the topic and continued to ask. If the answer was yes, then perhaps this escape was a farce from the beginning. Yes, the girl, who seemed to have never seen the sinister side of the world, answered without hesitation. Although it was easy to achieve the goal, why did he feel that there was no sense of accomplishment at all? Instead, there was a sense of guilt climbing up his spine. Because he's the only one that I can't see. The girl said seriously, "Did you open up your spiritual field to prevent being spied on?" "No, it's a higher level of power than that. It directly allows me to ignore the existence of the other party. No matter what method I use, I can't see the other party clearly." The girl replied with a smile. "It's like there's a black cloud that always shrouds the other party. It's incomparably mysterious." "Then what did you gain this time?" "The fried dumplings at the snack bar in the 3rd alley of East 2nd Street are delicious. I always feel that the information you collected is very subtle. There's no real gain." Su Feng's face became even more embarrassed. He even began to suspect that this girl simply wanted to go out to relax. "No," I touched his face, and it was different from what I imagined. It felt furry, and I was very satisfied. Generally speaking, that guy's head should be closer to smooth than hairy, right? After all, I'm blind. The girl said righteously. Su Feng shrugged and didn't answer. Because the road they chose was relatively remote, there was no one around except for the sound of insects and the secret troops hiding in the surroundings. Silence suddenly shrouded the two. After a long time, Su Feng said in a muffled voice, "I still feel that something is wrong. You weren't this kind of person who would do such a reckless thing before." "You're wrong, Commander Su." But the girl shook her head. "It's not that I didn't do such a reckless thing before, but before I did anything, I already knew the result because of my ability. All that was left was to choose the most correct action to carry out. Only this time, I used my ability to the maximum, but I still couldn't see through Mr. Anomaly's actions. Although I'm not sure if I left a good impression on him, my initial goal of experiencing an unknown trip has been successfully achieved." "So what did you say to him in the end?" Su Feng sighed again. His face became even more depressed. "I'm starting to suspect that in a few days, that guy will break into the super administration office to snatch you away." "Don't worry. I don't plan on becoming a member of his harem." The girl waved her hand. "I'm just concerned about the person who is the most special to me in this world." "Why does your word sound so dangerous, girl?" Su Feng thought to himself. After bidding farewell to the legendary girl A, who didn't say her name, Su Shinching began his return journey. On the way back, he met the trio of Song Yu, Qin Xingyan, and Mo Li. "Oh, we actually went around half of Jiangjin before we found him." Song Yu looked like she was about to collapse from exhaustion, because Mo Li didn't plan on seriously looking for Senior. Qin Xingyan was much better. She didn't even sweat, but she looked like she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Didn't she only bring us to food stalls, landlord?" Emoli swallowed the pineapple oil in his hand and gave a thumbs up to Su Shinching. Su Shinching also secretly gave a well-done hand gesture. The only thing he wanted to do now was to go back to the apartment and find his half-sister, Chiketsu. Chapter 556. Haha, I want to go out and play too. Inside Sakura apartment, Chihaya Fukuyama let out a long sigh. "I'm going out later, Chihaya-sama. Do you want to go for a walk with me?" Sakura Kobayashi Asahi put the leftovers in the fridge after sealing them in plastic wrap, and then calmly asked Chizeo Yamanaka, "By the way, the reason why there was leftover dinner was because neither Su Shenching nor Emoli called to inform the people at home if they wanted to go home for dinner. As a result, Asahi Sakura Kanji could only cook as much as he usually did when Emoli was there. However, none of them came back, so most of the food was leftover. The second chef of Sakura apartment, Asahi Sakura Kanji, complained, "Oh, Asahi, do you want to go out and buy something?" Chihaya Fukuyama seemed to be interested in this suggestion. Actually, the BL Doujinshi series of Sengoku Banana that I bought online has arrived in Jiangjin. I plan to pick it up myself. The maid girl held her face with both hands and showed an intoxicated smile full of anticipation. Ah, look at that smile. It's so cute. Chihaya Fukuyama covered his forehead and was speechless. Why is this girl's nature so rotten to this extent? Then Chihaya, Samayu. No, I'm not going. In order to avoid being looked at strangely by passers-by, Chihaya Fukuyama quickly distanced himself from the other party. Chihaya, do you want to go for a walk with Wolf? As soon as she looked away from Asahi Sakura Kanji, her eyes met the dog girl's. The latter happily took out a dog leash from the cupboard beside him. Come on, let's talk about BL. Chihaya Fukuyama immediately turned around and continued to talk to Asahi Sakura Kanji. Asahi Sakura Kanji was flattered. Unfortunately, in the end, Chihaya Fukuyama still felt that she couldn't talk about BL. So she turned her attention to the little girl Chiketsu, who was lying on the sofa in a daze. Although the last tenant of Sakura apartment, Yu Zhengjing, was right next to her, this otaku girl had to make up her mind to go to the convenience store dozens of meters away, let alone take a walk. Chiketsu, do you want to go out with your sister later? Chiketsu came back to her senses and looked at Chihaya Fukuyama in a daze. If it was in the past, the little girl would have happily agreed. However, she seemed a little strange today. Shenzhou, eldest sister, I'd better not go. Little Chiou shook her head and refused. What's wrong? Chihaya Fukuyama was keenly aware of the little girl's abnormality and asked with concern. The little girl hesitated for a long time before she finally whispered, I've been having the illusion that I'm seeing Blue recently. Blue was the little girl's kitten before her parents passed away. They had also passed away a long time ago. Her little face was red. It seemed that she felt that what she said sounded ridiculous. She thought that Chihaya Fukuyama and the others wouldn't believe her, so she was a little shy. Chihaya Fukuyama and the others were speechless when they saw the shadow of the black cat lying next to the little girl and yawning. The little girl had this cat ever since she moved to Sakura apartment. It was just that she couldn't see it before. Now it seemed that the little girl had lived in Sakura apartment for too long. Her astral vision had gradually awakened, so she could occasionally see the shadow of the kitten. Chihaya Fukuyama couldn't do anything about it. Usually, Su Shinshin protected the little girl very well. Even if Chiketsu was surrounded by supernatural beings, none of them had ever intruded into the little girl's life. This made the little girl the only person in Sakura apartment who still lived in the surface world. But now, this stability would gradually weaken as time passed. She probably misunderstood Chihaya Fukuyama's silence. The little girl forced a smile and said, I'll go back to my room first. This is going to be troublesome. Watching the little girl's back disappear down the stairs, Chihaya Fukuyama sighed softly. I hope that Sugai has a way to solve it. Chiketsu had experienced life and death, so he was much more mature than his peers. How could she be fooled by Chihaya Fukuyama's awkward expression? But she was still young, so she couldn't understand what Chihaya Fukuyama's expression meant. Back in her room, the little girl threw herself on the soft bed. She sniffed the smell of the sun on the thick sheets that had just been changed because of the cold weather. She thought about the shadow of the kitten that she had seen recently. What was going on? Unfortunately, in this situation, let alone a little girl like her, even if an adult came here, without knowing about the inner world that was buried under the surface of the world and filled with supernatural forces, they would only be at a loss in this situation. The little girl who thought hard to no avail could only sigh. She turned over like a salted fish and faced the ceiling. Her long black hair spread out like seaweed on the small single bed. She took out the necklace that Su Shinshin had given her and carefully looked at the pendant on the necklace. The pendant of the necklace was a silver ring, somewhat similar to the ring part of a ring. The edges of the ring were inlaid with crystals that sparkled like broken diamonds, seemingly expensive. At the center of the ring, there was a crystal fragment that would refract rainbow-colored light under the sunlight. This was given to her by Su Shinshin not long after the little girl moved to Sakura's apartment. At the time, Su Xinxing said that it was a gift from Blue. The little girl was happy and accepted it without thinking much. But now that she occasionally saw the shadow of the kitten, she couldn't help but feel that Su Xinxing's words were a bit strange. Was it an illusion? The little girl stared at the shiny pendant in a daze. She didn't know how much time had passed. Many scenes flashed in front of her eyes like a movie. When she came back to her senses, she suddenly realized that she was no longer on the single bed made of cherry wood in Sakura's apartment. Instead, she was in a boundless grassland. A gust of wind blew past, and the grassland was like a green ocean, setting off waves of emerald green waves. What's going on? Chiketsu's long hair danced wildly with the wind. She looked timidly at the sudden changes around her, somewhat at a loss. At this time, she suddenly found that in this green ocean, there was a strange object that looked like a boat. It was a small house made of wood that she didn't know where. Chapter 557. Little Chiou sneezed as she finally recovered from her dazed state of being at a loss due to the upheaval. It seemed that the temperature here was much lower than in Jianjin. Chiketsu, who was still wearing a short-sleeved shirt, curled up slightly and rubbed his arms. He then walked towards the wooden house, trembling. It was a small wooden house that looked like it came out of a fairy tale. It was built with logs and looked small and delicate, like a delicate toy that was displayed in a boutique cabinet and used for decoration rather than playing with. It was very beautiful. There was some firewood piled behind the wooden house, and the surrounding flower beds were filled with colorful, beautiful, but nameless flowers. Everything was as beautiful as a fairy tale. The only thing that was not right was that this kind of wooden house should appear in a forest. "Excuse me, is anyone home?" A child's emotions changed much faster than an adult's. Little Chiou, who was a little timid earlier, forgot about her fear and became a little more lively after most of her attention was drawn to the wooden house. Since her mind had not been corrupted by web novels, the little girl probably thought that she was dreaming. After a while, a reply came from the wooden house. "Who is it?" The voice was crisp and pleasant, but also slightly shrill. It seemed that the owner of the voice was either a girl or a cute boy who had yet to change his voice. Why did he emphasize the word cute? Before Chiketsu could figure out how to answer the question, there was a soft dong-dong-dong sound from inside the house. The door of the wooden house was opened. Standing at the entrance, standing on tiptoe to open the door, was a round-faced little girl who was shorter than Chiketsu. She was about half the height of the wooden door. She was wearing a simple hemp dress. Her bright silver hair was casually draped behind her head, as if it had not been taken care of. Chiketsu had seen people with similar hair color. The Pomeranian sister in Sakura's apartment had long silver hair, but there was a touch of beige in the silver. It was not that it was ugly, but it gave people a feeling that it was not pure enough. Theoretically speaking, a person's hair shouldn't be as shiny as silver. However, the little girl in front of him really did have a head of shiny silver hair, but it didn't have the slightest tinge of metallic luster. I didn't expect there to be a living person in this world other than me. It doesn't matter if you are a good person or a bad person. Come in and have a rest. The silver-haired little girl seemed to be very happy. She did not care about Chiketsu's opinion and directly pulled him into the house. Wait a minute. Wow, you are so strong." Chiketsu was shocked. He wanted to struggle, but he found that he could not break free from the hands of the little girl who was even smaller than him. "Ah, don't look at me like that. In terms of strength, whether it is the two-headed ogre or the behemoth, they are no match for me." After pushing Chiketsu onto the only sofa in the house, the little girl ran to the countertop and seemed to be doing something. "I'm sorry, I don't understand the two examples you gave me." Chiketsu shifted his little butt and said anxiously, It's okay. Those are animals that only exist in my hometown. It's normal that you don't know about them." The silver-haired little girl was in a good mood as she hummed a song. "My name is Chiketsu. What's your name?" Chiketsu asked as he looked around the house. The interior of the small house was not as exaggerated as it looked. It was much simpler. However, the fireplace, carpet, sofa, and some decorative bonsai Hanging paintings and deer-head specimens on the walls gave the house an elegant charm that was completely different from the style of the Celestial Empire. Tanya Eshawasu. The little girl who called herself Tanya carefully placed 2 cups of what looked like black tea on the coffee table next to Chiketsu. It seemed that she went to the countertop to make the tea. "You're in luck. I just boiled the water and you came over." Dunya pulled over a chair from the side and sat down. She picked up the teacup and took a sip, upon which a warm smile immediately appeared on her face. Sorry?" Chiketsu, who didn't know how to respond, tilted his head and swallowed his thanks. In short, he apologized first. "Why are you apologizing?" Tanya looked at him strangely. "Well, it's probably because no matter what the situation is, after apologizing, things won't get worse." Chiketsu thought hard and replied. Then he followed Tanya's example. He picked up the cup of hot tea and took a sip. As a result, he stuck his tongue out and tears appeared in the corners of his eyes. "But if you keep apologizing, life will only become bitter." Tanya pretended to be an adult and then winked at Chiketsu. "That's what my father said. Where is Tanya's father?" Chiketsu put down the cup and asked curiously. "I don't know." Tanya shook her head. Her beautiful silver hair swayed with the little girl's movements. It was very eye-catching in the slightly dim room. "My father is missing. Uncle Jambert and I have been looking for him for a long time, but we couldn't find him." "What about your mother?" Chiketsu asked again. "She passed away a long time ago." The other party took another sip of tea and then replied. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." Chiketsu, who was sensible, immediately showed a sad expression. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that even Tanya's silver hair became a little dimmer because of her master's sadness. "Well, actually, my parents have also passed away." In order to comfort the other party, Chiketsu thought for a long time and could only say this in the end. "And they passed away not long ago." "Oh. Is that so? It seems that the 2 of us are a little alike." Tanya cheered up and smiled at Chiketsu. "By the way, after your parents passed away, what did you do? Do you live alone?" Chiketsu shook his head. "My brother took me to his house." Speaking of his brother, Chiketsu's originally sad face immediately showed a happy smile. Sure enough, children's emotions change quickly. "Brother?" Tanya blinked her big eyes and looked at her in confusion. "Yes, that's right. In fact, before my parents passed away, I didn't know that I had a brother." So Chiketsu happily told his new friend about his brother. Chapter 558. So that's how it is. You transmigrated from another world. After listening to Chiketsu's story, Tonia crossed her arms and pretended to be mature. She closed her eyes and nodded. Transmigration. Chiketsu was obviously not familiar with this concept. He blinked his eyes in confusion. Generally speaking, it means going from one world to another. Tonia tried to explain to the girl, "Am I dead?" But obviously, something went wrong during the transmission of the information. Chiketsu's chubby little face was full of shock. "Why would you think of that?" Tonia puffed her cheeks, looking a little angry. "Because when my parents died, my relatives said that they went to another world." The expression on Chiketsu's face became even more sorrowful, but combined with the content of his words, it was funny. "No, although I can't tell what's wrong, it's definitely not like that." Tonia slapped the table and said. The 2 tea sets on the table bounced up and down as she slapped them. At this moment, little Chiyoyu's tears were already dripping down. Tonia could only comfort her in a hurry. At this moment, the behavior of the 2 was completely opposite to their height and appearance. The smaller Tonia's behavior was more mature, more like an elder sister. "Tonia, did you also transmigrate to this world?" After sobbing for a while, Chiketsu finally calmed down and asked Tonia in a low voice. "Well, actually, I've been looking for my father." Dunya put her hands on her knees and looked a little embarrassed. "I remember a long time ago, I was curled up in a dark place alone, unable to see or hear anything, until one day, Uncle Jongbor came to me and said that he would accompany me to find my father. After that, I went to many, many places with him." As she spoke, Dunya began to tell Chiyoyu about some of the things she had seen and heard during her journey. Most of them were like fairy tales to little Chiyoyu, absurd and unbelievable. There were 3 planets that were connected by a gigantic sword, a super deep underground abyss that was deeper than the planet itself, a world where time was frozen and the surface of the sea was harder than diamond, a world where the soil was like water and all creatures lived in a world of liquid clay, and a mysterious world that was supported by a scepter. Little Chiyoyu was already treating them as stories by the end of her narration. Just like that, the man the girl called Uncle Jongbor brought the little girl through one world after another, all for the sake of finding that irresponsible father of the little girl. But when we came to this world, there was an accident. At this point, the girl's expression became much gloomier. This is a world that is on the verge of destruction. The world itself has begun to fall apart, and even the essence of the world has disappeared. Even Uncle Jongbor is helpless. The Spear of Seven's ability to travel between worlds lost its effect after this world fell apart, and lost the concept of world. So we are stuck here. Stuck here. Does that mean we can't get out? Chiketsu asked incredulously with his eyes wide open. Yes, that's it. Tonya nodded. Although there was a chance to escape at first, when he sensed that this world was about to be destroyed, Uncle Jongbor gave up the opportunity to escape and tried to save this world. Unfortunately, even though Uncle Jongbor tried his best to save this world, he still failed in the end. This world still self-destructed, and there doesn't seem to be any other survivors nearby. Even this grassland was planted by me little by little after the space stabilized a bit. It's very tiring. Although I'm not too sure, traveling all over the place and being trapped here in the end. Don't you think it's hard for you? Chiketsu asked with some pity. Don't you blame that Uncle Jongbor? Although it's a bit hard, I don't blame him. Because Uncle Jongbor said that he and my father are the same type of people. What do you mean? Chiketsu was confused. Although I'm not boasting, my father is a very amazing person. He has accomplished many great deeds and saved tens of thousands of worlds. He is regarded as a great hero by the inhabitants of many worlds. Even Uncle Jongbor thinks so. At the last moment of this world, he said that if it was my father who was here, he would definitely be able to stop the destruction of this world. Dunya's eyes were full of splendor. It seemed that she really admired her father. But saving the world is also relative. As the price of saving the world, I'm afraid that countless enemies have died in his hands. Because he was born on a peaceful earth, Chiketsu, who had no concept of killing, still had a puzzled look on his face. Seeing him like this, Dunya could not help but laugh. Soon after, the silver-haired little girl regained her previous sorrowful expression. Uncle Jongbor once said that when a person's hands are stained with blood, their heart will gradually become desolate. In order to not be devoured by killing, they will have a pillar to support their own spirit. The reason why Uncle Jongbor still extended a helping hand to this world and the inhabitants of this world when he knew that he could not stop the destruction of this world is probably because the pillar of his heart is the sense of justice that comes from his nature. What does this have to do with your father? Little Chiketsu, who could not understand this, asked. Because my father's spiritual pillar is all broken. Dunya's voice became solemn and clear. Uncle Jongbor said that when he last saw my father seemed to have been abandoned by all the worlds. He was just clenching his teeth and holding on by relying on his unreasonable strength. If this continues, sooner or later, his heart will shatter like this world. So before that, I have to find him and become his pillar. At this moment, little Chiketsu, who still did not understand the situation, suddenly felt that the silver-haired girl in front of him was exuding a holy and pure light. Chapter 559. Compared to that, I'm more interested in knowing how to get back, Chiketsu sighed. All I have to do is wake up. But how do I wake up? Looks like the little girl still thinks she's dreaming. I told you that you've transmigrated to this world. Dunya turned around and pinched the holy light behind her. She then threw it into the trash can beside the coffee table. Can't I go back? Chiketsu looked a little scared. If it was before, this space would be completely sealed, and there would be no way to get in or out. Uncle Jambor just told me to wait here. He thought that my dad would definitely find me. Dunia crossed her arms and looked like she was in deep thought. But your appearance means that this space has started to change. Maybe we can leave now. Really? Chiketsu was pleasantly surprised. Well, no matter what, if you want to go back, Chiketsu, you have to try. Dunia was very cautious and didn't make any promises. Okay, I'll give it a try. Chiketsu raised her hands and shouted cutely. Because it's quite far away, I suggest we go after dinner. Okay, let's eat. Although Chiketsu had just finished eating, she agreed to Dunia's suggestion. She didn't know if it was because she had transmigrated, or simply because she didn't have enough to eat before, or because she was feeling a little hungry. However, the broken world Dunia was in wasn't very rich. Even though she had tried her best to find food for Chiketsu, the food on the table was still not very sumptuous. There was salty and bitter black meat jerky, a salad that looked a bit like leek, a soup made from weeds rather than wild vegetables, a pancake that looked like a vegetable cake, and yellow rice mixed with many strange colored grains. It's not good. Chiketsu lost her appetite after tasting a little of everything. Sorry, this is all I can do. Dunia couldn't help but show an apologetic expression. It's not Dunia's fault. Chiketsu shook her head and said excitedly, I'll take you to a feast when we get out, although my brother will definitely complain. Go out. It's about time. Dunia's expression was somewhat gloomy. After the meal, Dunia took him outside the house. Although I don't know how you appeared here, but if there is a way to leave this space, there's only one place I can think of. It's over there. She stretched out her short arm and pointed to the edge of the grassland. Undulating hills could be vaguely seen in that direction, but behind the hills, there was a shadow that was so faint that little Chiketsu couldn't even see it clearly. Perhaps because it was too far away, little Chiketsu even felt that the shadow stretched across the entire world, as if it was connected to heaven and earth. Oh! Little Choyua let out an incomprehensible sigh. Then, she tilted her head. But it feels so far away. Because the ground of this world is flat, so if there's enough light, you can see very far away. Dunia nodded. That's the center of this space, about 100 kilometers away from the grassland. 100 kilometers. Chiketsu was shocked by the unit of length that was rarely used in school. It's a kilometer from my brother's apartment to the commercial street, and it takes 15 minutes to walk there. 100 kilometers is 115 minutes, and an hour is 60 minutes. If that's the case, the little girl counted with her fingers for a long time before she finally figured it out. She was shocked. It takes 20 hours. And it was wrong. It's too long to walk, and it's troublesome to carry food. So, we have to choose a faster way. Dunia put her hand over her eyes. The weather is good today. It's suitable to fly there. Fly there. Didn't I tell you? Dunia took 2 steps forward, then suddenly turned around with her hands behind her back. She smiled sweetly at Chiketsu. I'm a dragon. In the next moment, a pair of silver dragon wings that were far too large for Dunia's short and petite body unfurled from her back. Under the illumination of the white light from the sky, the wings glittered as if they were made of metal. Little Choyua stared blankly for a while. Then, like a child who had seen her favorite toy, although she was still young, she approached Dunia with sparkling eyes. Chapter 560. This pillar feels a bit strange. At first, Chiketsu thought it was a cylindrical mountain. After all, nothing was strange in the dream world, but upon closer inspection, he found that the mountain that seemed to connect the sky and the earth was not navy blue like the usual mountain rocks. Instead, it was closer to the color of flesh. That's not a pillar. Dunia, who was carrying little Choyu on her back, was flying in a superhuman posture. When she heard little Choyu's words, she replied with a bitter smile. Mountain. Chiketsu raised his little head a little, but the wind outside made a gurgling sound. He quickly lowered his head and pressed it against Dunia's back. It's a finger. Dunya didn't seem to notice what was happening behind her. She slowed down a little to prepare for the landing. She explained to Chiketsu. After Uncle Jongbor lost the Spear of Seven that Dad and the others built for him in this world, he faced the end of the world with his own strength. Like Dad's former companions, he transcended the shackles of the power of heroes, broke through the constraints of the world, completed the self-consistency of the law, and achieved the true sublimation of life in the true sense. She said softly, strangely, in the whistling wind produced by flying at a relatively fast speed in the sky. Her soft words should be drowned out and dissipated in an instant, but Chiketsu heard her words in full. It was a pity that the content was too profound for little Chiyoyu to comprehend. If he chose to retreat at that time, Uncle Jongbor should be able to survive like me with his body that has transcended the world, but in the end, he decided to face his own death. At the last moment of the world, in order to preserve the remaining fire of civilization, he used all his strength and struck at the existence that brought about the end of the world. After that blow, his sturdy body was torn apart. But thanks to this, although this world was fragmented, it was not turned into ashes by the catastrophe and completely disappeared. And in the space we're in right now, because of me, Uncle Jongbor left behind 3 fingers. The one that supports the sky is his index finger, the one that turns into the earth is his thumb, and the one that evolves into all living things is his little finger. He probably feels sorry for me and my father, so he wants me to live a good life in this space until my father can find me. Hearing this, Chiketsu touched the back of Dunya's head for some reason. Dunya? ? Hey, I was going to pat your head, Dunya. Chiketsu stuck out his tongue and said, but my head is too short, and your wings are in the way, so I can only touch the back of your head. Is this a new prank? Of course not. Although I don't quite understand what you're saying. You must have a good relationship with that Uncle Jongbor, right? Little Chiyoyu's voice became much gentler. I once watched the person closest to me leave. At that time, I couldn't stop crying. In the end, I cried until I couldn't even cry anymore. If I didn't meet Big Brother, I think I would have continued to be sad for a long time. Although I don't know what kind of feelings you had when you sent that uncle off, I think it must have been something very, very painful. That's why I wanted to pat your head, like Big Brother, to comfort you. Really, if that's the case, you're more than 100 years too late, Dunya complained, but her voice was as gentle as a spoiled child. At this point, Dunya finally landed on the slightly undulating ground. Although she tried her best to be as gentle as possible, Chiketsu still slipped off Dunya's back due to the inertia of landing. He fell face down on the grass and let out a cute whimper. Ah, sorry, because I've never flown with someone before. Dunya hurriedly helped him up and apologized profusely. It's okay, I'm fine. Chiketsu, whose nose was red from the bump, waved his hand and said, because of the bump, his voice sounded a little strange. That's good. Dunya breathed a sigh of relief. Then, her gaze turned to the towering pillar not far away. If there's a place in this space that's the most vulnerable and most likely to be transmigrated, it's here. Is it like this? Chiketsu rubbed his nose and said in a muffled voice, Dunya, you haven't seen me in a long time. Are there other living people in this space? At this moment, a dark shadow suddenly shrouded the two of them. Little Chiyoyu's movements were a little stiff as she looked towards the black shadow. Then he saw a muscular man who could cosplay as Hercules without feeling out of place. Eek! The little girl was so scared that she hid behind Dunya. Don't be afraid, Chiketsu. He's the Uncle Jongbor I was talking about. Dunya still looked quite cheerful. But the moment she said that, little Chua trembled even more violently, like a little quail that had shrunk into a ball in winter. But didn't you just say that Uncle Jongbor is already dead? Yes, he's dead. Dunya nodded. Ha, and his death was quite miserable. The biggest piece of his body was his finger. Can you believe it? Mengnan was also quite cheerful as he used a barbarian style to talk about his own death. He actually looked very happy. Chiketsu's eyes almost turned into question marks. She felt that her worldview was about to collapse at this moment. Actually, there's nothing strange about it. This world doesn't have an independent reincarnation system like the world I've been to before. Instead, like most worlds, the soul of a living being is directly connected to the world's origin after death. Therefore, after the world collapses and the origin disappears, the concept of life and death becomes very vague. Even the dead can reappear and be treated as a type of soul. Dunya seemed to have seen through Chiketsu's doubts and began to explain to her. Chiketsu still looked confused. But this time, Dunya didn't seem to want to explain too much. She just gently tiptoed and touched Chiketsu's head. It's okay. Leave everything to us. Just treat this as a dream. ? Chiketsu's face was full of doubts, but in the end, she nodded. Oh, this girl. At this time, the muscular man on the opposite side seemed to have noticed something. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Chiketsu. After seeing that the latter was even more afraid, he showed a relieved expression and turned to look at Dunya. Forget it, Dunya. What's the matter? I want to send her outside. Dunya obediently touched Chiketsu's head again. Then she told the muscular man about what happened earlier. You really know how to make trouble for me. The muscular man sighed, thought for a while, and then said, If your guess is right, this is indeed the weakest part of the realm. But because of my finger, ordinary means can't pass through the world wall. Is there no way at all? Dunya asked unwillingly. Although they haven't known each other for a long time, she did see Chiketsu as her own sister. She really cared about her sister. Not really. The best way to break through my defense is for me to throw her up. If she can cross over, she probably has a special constitution that allows her to pass through the world wall. But the problem is that when I throw her out, to be honest, it's no different from throwing her into a magic crystal cannon made by the dwarves. I'm afraid that the moment she leaves the cannon, she will be blown into a pile of minced meat. The muscular man shook his head and explained the problem to Dunya. Suwatokana. Nanny. By the way, what does this conversation mean? Your father liked to say this to us back then. The muscular man subconsciously continued the conversation. I don't know. Dunya replied with a cheerful smile. But if you're only worried about leaving the cannon, I can solve this problem. Dunya turned around and came face to face with Chiketsu. Then the silver-haired little girl grabbed the black-haired little girl's hands. As the two interlocked fingers, the silver-haired little girl moved closer to the black-haired little girl, and the two were almost touching each other. Dunya also turned her head, so that her cheek was tightly pressed against Chiketsu's face. The way the two little Lolas stuck to each other was very cute and pleasing to the eye, especially Dunya, who looked happy and proud. Little Chiyoyu, on the other hand, looked a lot shyer. The two completely different appearances made them even more adorable. If there was a circle of lilies around them, they could be directly photographed and used as a hanging painting. Look at what? Mengnen was confused. He thought for a moment, then said with some confusion, If your father was here, he would be very happy. But my aesthetic standards are not the same as humans. I prefer strong women. I used to be a green-skinned female beast man in the hills north of Orvaya, the kind with fangs on their chin. They are very sexy. I have no interest in normal human women, especially those without breasts and buttocks. Uncle Jambard, are you an idiot? Dunya's eyes turned into cute crescents. Your father always says that about me. Why are you becoming more and more like that guy in this kind of place? What I mean is, you can throw me out too. My cloud scales can protect Chiketsu. Dunya continued. The muscular man thought for a moment and then hammered his hand. Maybe it will work. After all, it's someone else's idea. The muscular man had always followed the maxim of acting when he thought of something. Therefore, after discussing some emergency measures with Dunya, the muscular man put his hand on the ground in a half-kneeling position and had the two of them stand on it. Hurry up. After all, I don't have a body now. The time I can materialize is limited. Chiketsu was a little scared at first, but for some reason, when he saw Dunya's encouraging eyes, most of the worry in his heart disappeared. Just like that, they stood on the muscular man's palm that was several times bigger than a casserole. Hold on tight, Chiketsu. The range of my cloud scales is a little small. Okay. Chiketsu immediately hugged Dunia's body tightly. Ugh. Dunia was shorter than Chiketsu and was directly suffocated by his bare hug. Fortunately, Chiketsu soon realized that something was wrong and loosened his arms slightly. The next moment, the muscular man's muscles suddenly bulged, and the blue veins on his arms were violently protruding. Before Chiketsu could react, they were already thrown into the air by the muscular man. Chiketsu let out an involuntary cry. Don't worry, I will protect you. Dunia's timely voice made the girl's fear fade away. Due to the violent friction with the air, the surroundings had turned orange-red, which represented the high temperature. However, Dunia's cloud scales seemed to be very impressive. Not only did it isolate the damage, but it also isolated the high temperature. The originally vast and boundless earth beneath their feet had also become visible. The only thing that didn't change was the finger that supported the sky beside them. After flying for a long time, when the land below them became the size of a chessboard, finally, a strange hole appeared in the sky. At the same time, the muscular man seemed to have used up all his strength. The speed of their ascent gradually slowed until it came to a stop, as if they would fall at any time. Dunia. While Chiketsu was at a loss, Dunia let go of Chiketsu's hand, turned to Chiketsu's back, and spread her dragon wings. Don't worry, I will definitely send you back. The dragon wings exerted strength again, and Chiketsu rose toward the hole again. But not long after, as if they had crashed into an invisible wall, the space in front of Chiketsu rippled. If it weren't for the cloud scales, perhaps Chiketsu would have been smashed into meat paste. Dunia, trust me. Okay. Dunia yelled like an angry kitten. Her body bloomed in a silver light, and her beautiful silver hair danced wildly. The propulsion of the metallic dragon wings became stronger, and the ripples in the space in front of Chiketsu became denser. The sound of shattering mirrors sounded. At first, Chiketsu thought it was Dunia's cloud scales that shattered, but after a few moments, she realized that it was the invisible wall in front of her that separated her from the big hole. Chapter 561. Probably because the so-called dream consumed a lot of energy, little Chiketsu told Su Shinshin a few words in the dream in a daze, and then fell asleep again. Fortunately, after Emoli's confirmation, this time little Chiketsu was just sleeping, unlike before, when he seemed to be about to disappear and gradually became transparent. It was just that at this time, Su Shinshin was still in a state of shock and had not passed the will test. If there was a powerhouse in this world who had achieved the unity of heaven and man and could perceive the state of the world, he would be able to notice that the whole world had trembled many times in just a few minutes. Mr. Landlord, what do you think? Emoli tilted his head and asked. It's because we are of the same mind. So she felt that I was shaken. Su Shinshin came back to his senses and thought to himself, to be honest, I really want to believe that Dunia is real. The smile on Su Shinshin's face was particularly bitter. But reason tells me that it's impossible. After all, I was the one who returned Dunia's body with my own hands. And the Dunia in little Chiketsu's description was as if she had never seen Su Shinshin before. Her knowledge of Su Shinshin seemed to be completely obtained from Jiangbor. But in fact, Su Shinshin once traveled in a time-warped world with his daughter for 3 years. He even almost wanted to give up saving the world and run away to live an ordinary life with his daughter, if it were not for an accident led by the Demon King's army that took Dunia's life. At the same time, that was also the beginning of Su Shinshin's most agitated state, and in order to hunt down the other party, he destroyed several worlds. Even if some worlds have the ability to resurrect the dead, treasures, or elixirs, because their world spirituality is far lower than Aravia's, it's impossible to save Dunia with that little effect. What's more, that girl's soul should have been involved in the warp time, and there should be no way to return to the normal timeline. The more Su Shinshin spoke, the more depressed he became. Originally, there was a bit of hope in his eyes, but at this moment, it was completely dim. In the end, when he turned his head, he saw Jasmine's expression that said, "Oh no, I was only asking the landlord what he thought about tomato hot pot for dinner, but his reply was so serious that I didn't know how to continue the conversation. Suddenly, Su Xinqing felt even more powerless. I shouldn't have expected this little fool to be serious. If that's the case, why don't we go to that world and confirm it? At this time, Emoli suddenly spoke. Can you do that? That world fragment is gone. Su Xinqing was a little surprised. Just now, he and Emoli had confirmed that the other world fragment in Chiketsu's pendant was not lost, but it recovered a bit of the concept of the world, so it was expelled by the world where Earth was, just like the reversal of the process of a normal world turning into a lattice world. If that space was given billions of years as a unit of time, sooner or later it would become a real world again. Without any clues, trying to find that world again was as difficult as trying to find a piece of sand in the desert that only had half of its original size left. Unlock another layer of the seal, I'm 20% sure. Emoli nodded. What about the probability of the world being destroyed because you unlocked the seal? 80%. If it was more than a year ago, Su Xinqing would not have met Qin Xingyan, Songyu, Chiketsu, and the others. Chihaya Fukuyama. As the first batch of tenants, am I being treated too badly? At that time, let alone a 20% chance, and an 80% chance of the world being destroyed, even if there was a 99% chance of the world being destroyed, and only a 1% chance of finding the other party, he would probably do it without hesitation. But now, it was no longer possible. Although he also had the option of bringing Emoli to the barren world to unlock the seal, after the third layer of the seal was unlocked, Emoli's state was already very unstable. Su Xinqing even felt that his unstable state was related to Emoli's uncontrollable magic. Who knew what would happen when the fourth layer of the seal was unlocked at that time? Even if he was there, he would not dare to bring Emoli back to the world where Earth was. He could only drift in the void and look for the person who could reseal Emoli. But even if he was lucky, it would probably take hundreds or even thousands of years to find that person who could reseal Emoli. By that time, even long-lived practitioners like Qin Xingyan might have died, and mortals like Song Yu might not even have ashes left after being cremated. Therefore, after a long period of hesitation, Su Xinqing let out a long sigh. Forget it, landlord. Because they were of the same mind, Emoli could naturally feel Su Xinqing's conflicted and uncomfortable feelings. The little girl walked briskly to Su Xinqing, then reached out and rubbed Su Xinqing's furrowed brows. Although she did not have any expression on her face, one could feel that she was distressed. If that Dong Nia is really the daughter of her and mine, then sooner or later we will meet again. Su Xinqing suddenly smiled, then reached out and rubbed Emoli's soft little face. The little girl broke free from his evil clutches, then covered her face that was red from Su Xinqing's rubbing, showing a dissatisfied expression. Su Xinqing, on the other hand, did not care about the little girl's expression and stretched lazily. I'm hungry after thinking about it for so long. Emoli, let's go eat dinner. What? The little girl, who was full of resentment, immediately became spirited. Speaking of which, is dinner tomato hot pot? The little girl nodded, then blinked her wine-red eyes. Landlord, how did you know? Because we are of the same mind. Oh, the same mind is amazing. Emoli shook her head and sighed expressionlessly, her golden-side ponytail swaying with her movements. After walking out of the room, Su Xinqing looked back at Chiketsu, who was sleeping soundly, and the cat guardian spirit beside her, then gently closed the door. Little Chiou-Yu, who was in her dreams, was completely unaware of this. She was like a spoiled kitten, twisting her body and burying her petite body in the blanket as she mumbled in a muffled voice. Dong Nia. Chapter 562. I feel like things haven't been going well. Songyu sat on the sofa in Sakura's apartment. She rested her cheek on one hand and sighed deeply. What's wrong? Chihaya Fukuyama, who had just returned home from work, took out a bottle of iced milk from the fridge and took a big gulp. She didn't care that her lips were stained with milk and asked, I feel like you've been in the apartment more than me in the past 2 days. It's just that Shenxing and I haven't had many opportunities to deepen our relationship recently. I feel like he's done a lot of things recently, but none of them have anything to do with me. Song Yu complained angrily. Ah, it's about that Baldy again. Chihaya Fukuyama's shoulders drooped. However, before she could finish speaking, a sneeze came from Su Shenxing's room not far away. It resounded throughout the sky. This made the girl stop talking immediately. After a moment of confirming that the person being talked about didn't come out, Chihaya Fukuyama continued. What's so good about that guy? Why do you all like to stick to him so much? Just because of that sneeze, the girl's previous imposing manner had plummeted. Now, her voice sounded as if she was mumbling to herself. Even if that guy is good at fighting, he's not that useful in this era. Do you need a very specific reason to like someone? Song Yu was very open-minded. And to be honest, I wish that other than me, no one else can see the advantages of Shenxing. That way, no one will compete with me. Okay. Then I won't covet your treasure. After drinking the milk in the small square box, Chihaya Fukuyama planned to go back to her room to rest for a while and come out again at dinner time. However, she stopped after taking 2 steps. Well, what do you mean? The god from Japan turned around and found Song Yu tugging at the corner of her clothes. I heard that it's very popular in Japan. Song Yu said with a serious face. Talking about life. No way. The person who told you this is either a bastard with ulterior motives or an otaku. Chihaya Fukuyama frowned. Realizing that things weren't as simple as they seemed, he immediately tried to escape. Previously, didn't you often discuss things with Miss Chin? That guy is now an enemy. Song Yu frowned, full of fighting spirit. What kind of youthful romance story is this? Chihaya Fukuyama couldn't help but complain in his native Japanese. She probably thought that if this world were to be converted into a novel, it would be like a fantasy novel. As for Xingyan, she is very reliable as a friend, but as an enemy, she is extremely difficult to deal with. Song Yu didn't understand Japanese, so he ignored Chihaya Fukuyama's ridicule and continued to speak as if he was facing a formidable enemy. Indeed, it would be very troublesome to make Miss Chin my enemy. Chihaya Fukuyama's thoughts were also led astray by Song Yu, and he actually began to think of countermeasures. Especially a few days ago, after she came back with the bald landlord, Mr. San, after recovering from his injuries, she seems to have become even more courageous. If the pressure that Qin Xingyan gave Chihaya Fukuyama in the past was purely due to her meticulous lifestyle, then now that she had become a celestial being, the pressure that Qin Xingyan gave her wasn't just about her lifestyle, but also the pressure that came from being a race that was close to being a god. Right. Especially since that girl likes to win straight up. Even I can't help but be tempted by her cute appearance. If I want to be her enemy, I don't have much confidence in winning alone. Song Yu said excitedly when she saw that Chihaya Fukuyama seemed to agree with her words. Chihaya Fukuyama maintained a safe distance of nearly 2 meters away from Song Yu without batting an eyelid. Then he revealed a suspicious expression. Tempted? No, I'm not a Yuri. Song Yu hurriedly explained. I just think that Xingyan, who has finally discovered her true love, is very cute. Thus, the safe distance increased to 3 meters. Perhaps it was the power of the gods, but something similar to a wall of the heart appeared in the middle. Why the hell is this? Song Yu was embarrassed. Perhaps it would be best to matchmake this girl and the bald landlord, Mr. San. At this moment, Chihaya Fukuyama thought to himself, at least I can guarantee that the relatively pure Qin Xingyan won't be tainted by poisonous fangs, regardless of whether it's Mr. San's or this suspected Yuri girl's. Is it my imagination? Why do I feel like you're thinking of something that will slander her image? No, actually, I'm just considering whether to help matchmake you and Mr. San. Chihaya Fukuyama hurriedly said, feeling uneasy under Song Yu's gaze. At this moment, the sound of the Empire's marching music rang out from Song Yu's pocket, giving off a boss atmosphere. This made Song Yu's expression stiffen. She gave up on explaining and hurriedly took out her phone from her pocket. The 2 words mother on the phone screen kept vibrating, as if reminding the girl to pick up the call as soon as possible. The girl hesitated, and after a while, the phone stopped ringing. "You're not picking up?" Chihaya Fukuyama asked curiously. But before Song Yu could answer, the background music of the dark and evil forces once again rang out. This time, Song Yu's expression showed that she had given up on resisting and picked up the phone. She quickly changed her expression into a bright and cheerful smile at a speed that made Chihaya Fukuyama feel ashamed of himself. Then, she used a sweet voice that gave Argata-sama goosebumps to call out, "Mom." Chinzao's entire body trembled as if she had just woken up from a dream. She suddenly realized that this was the best time for her to retreat. So, she paid attention to Song Yu's movements as she quietly walked to the door. But before she reached the door, she heard Song Yu's exclamation. "Ah, what? The boyfriend I mentioned last time." Large beads of sweat appeared on Song Yu's forehead. Then, she put on a brave expression that even someone as innocent as a dog girl could see, and said through gritted teeth, "Yes, that's right. I have a boyfriend. I don't need any blind dates." The raging flames of gossip made Chihaya Fukuyama stop in her tracks and prick up her ears to eavesdrop. But what greeted her was Song Yu's even louder exclamation. "What? You and Dad are coming to Jiangjin?" Chihaya Fukuyama subconsciously felt that something was wrong. Just as she wanted to run away, she met Song Yu's eyes that were filled with shock and helplessness. So, without Su Xinqing knowing, a strange alliance appeared in Sakura's apartment. Chapter 563. I'm so miserable. A faint male voice came from the other end of the phone. Su Xinqing's eyebrows twitched, and then he sighed deeply. "Didn't I apologize just now? I trusted you so much." The voice of the person on the other end still sounded full of resentment. He was none other than Xiao Jingyi, who was implicated when the crooked fruit monster came to Jiangjin to cause trouble some time ago. Because of the blood bottle Su Xinqing brought back from the other world, this guy's life was quickly out of danger. Although his whole body was still wrapped in bandages, his consciousness was more or less awake. It was because of this that he could call Su Xinqing to complain. At that time, the Super Administrative Office had already noticed that the foreign supernatural creatures had gathered in Jiangjin. In the end, because of the existence of Su Xinqing, their judgment was wrong, and they let Xiao Jingyi take full responsibility to solve the situation. Xiao Jingyi also believed in Su Xinqing's power and did not ask much of Su Xinqing. As a result, not only did he suffer life-threatening injuries, but even his home was destroyed by those monsters. He was very unlucky. In order to cope with the vacancy of the Super Administrative Office in Jiangjin, the central government had to parachute Su Feng, who had been transferred back, although more of the reason was to escort the legendary Girl A. Actually, for Xiao Jingyi, it was not unacceptable for him to be injured. He was originally a criminal police officer. Because of his outstanding resume, he had risen step by step from investigating cases, such as the theft of electric scooters, to investigating various difficult criminal cases. Although later, because of Su Xinqing, the direction of his life had deviated a little. In short, he had long been prepared to be injured or even killed in the line of duty. After all, the suspects in many criminal cases were extremely vicious criminals. However, the noisy furniture and electrical monsters in his house had suffered heavy casualties because of this incident. Most of them were destroyed in the fight with the demons to protect him. After he regained consciousness from his coma and asked Fang Xiaoqing to help him check and count, he found that the number of little monsters who survived the incident could be counted with 2 hands. Although he always complained that those fellows were too annoying, when those fellows really left, he couldn't help but feel lonely and sad. It was precisely because of this that he called to complain, regardless of the fact that Su Xinqing had avenged him. She wasn't really dissatisfied with Su Xinqing for not being able to save her in time. She just wanted to find someone to vent the frustration in her heart. After all, no matter how unreasonable he was, he couldn't complain to Fang Xiaoqing, who accompanied him day and night, right? Old Su was also a smart person. He quickly understood the other party's meaning from the other party's tone. He did not refute the other party's words and only listened to the other party's complaints. After that, "I help you take revenge." You should know that those bastards didn't even leave an intact corpse. Su Shinching comforted him. This actually increased the workload of our super administrative office. A large group of foreigners suddenly disappeared. Just making up a reason to submit to the Public Security Bureau is enough for me to worry about. What are you worried about? Don't think I don't know. Didn't Su Feng come back? But he assigned this job to Xiao Qing. I can't just watch Xiao Qing be distressed over there and do nothing myself. After going around in a circle, the work still came to me. Then just write something casually. For example, the other party committed suicide with a gun to the back of his head. We're not in the United States. Then let's play hide and seek. Stop messing around. In short, after persuading the other party for a long time, old Su finally appeased the other party. After he put down the phone, Jasmine, who had been eagerly waiting at the side for a long time, finally ran over. Landlord, speak to those who play games with me. You're not eating chicken today? That's rare. Time freeze massacre cheat. Speak if you're tired. Cheaters are so pitiful. Speaking of which, is it really okay to temporarily freeze time in that kind of place? As he spoke, Su Shinching followed Emoli to the computer. What is this, a Mickey Mouse with a broken head? Teacup head speak. Emoli handed Su Shinching a controller. How strange. It reminds me of Olavia's alchemy creature. Thus, Su Shinching played computer games with Emoli for 2 hours. Seeing that it was getting late, and that the highest difficulty level of the game was too easy, Su Shinching, who felt a bit bored, simply let his 2P character self-destruct. Maybe I need to buy some ingredients for dinner. I'll go ask Sonya first. You continue to play. Oh, Molly was distracted, and her character also died along with him. Thus, the little girl puffed up her cheeks and stared at Su Shinching with cute eyes full of resentment. After using time freeze for so long, his gaming skills were naturally a bit rusty. It was clear that even though Emoli played a lot of games, his mechanics were still a lot worse than Su Shinching's. You can go find Lu Jingjing. Doesn't she know how to play games too? Su Shinching, who felt a bit uncomfortable from the girl's piercing gaze, could only immediately push the blame to a certain otaku who always stayed at home. Emoli immediately showed an expression that said, "Yeah, there's such a thing." When Su Shinching walked into the living room, he vaguely heard a voice from upstairs saying, "Wait, at least let me finish typing this chapter. If I don't, the readers will send me razor blades." Su Shinching drew a cross in front of his chest and prayed for her soul in heaven, hoping that she would be able to rest in peace. Songyu, who saw Su Shinching walk in, jumped in fright. Beside her was Chihaya Fukuyama, who had a complicated expression on his face. Goddess Darren looked at Su Shinching, then looked at Songyu, and then solemnly raised his fist. Songyu tilted her head in confusion. Then Chihaya Fukuyama gave her a thumbs up with an expression that said, "Good luck." Almost at the same time, he ran out of the living room, like a gust of wind. That guy actually betrayed me. Suddenly, Songyu's entire body went OTZ. The fragile alliance between the girls was destroyed just like that. What are you guys playing? Su Shinching, who had witnessed all of this, asked curiously. Songyu didn't know what to think, but her entire face turned red. She lowered her head, and from time to time, she would raise her face and glance at Su Shinching like a small animal, and then quickly lower her head again. I have a small request. Not sure if it was because she was too nervous, but the girl's voice sounded a bit shrill. Okay. Su Shinching sat across from her, nodded seriously, and tried his best to put on a cultured and refined smile. You've helped me a lot. If there's anything I can do, just say it. Chapter 564. I haven't been to Jiangjin for so long, I didn't expect the changes to be so drastic. A beautiful middle-aged woman was walking slowly on the sidewalk. From her elegant face, one could vaguely see the shadow of Songyu. She then turned to look at the middle-aged man behind her and raised her eyebrows. Old man, you're really something. You're always so angry. It's because of you that you came to such a faraway place to study. It's been so many years, and you still don't know how to change. That girl didn't even go home during the Mid-Autumn Festival. She must have forgotten that her parents are still at home. The man was clearly in his prime, but his hair was white and his face was full of vicissitudes. His chiseled face gave off a dignified aura, although his words sounded rather harsh. The beautiful middle-aged woman knew very well that the other party wasn't really blaming the daughter he doted on the most. At this moment, he was like a boy whose toy had been snatched away. He was childishly throwing a tantrum. "Isn't there still her aunt?" the woman said helplessly. "That aunt of hers is not a good person. If I leave you in her care, I'll be even more worried." The man snorted again and said in a rough voice, "If you ask me, our Ewer is so smart. She doesn't need anyone to take care of her, right? Look, she became a big star a while ago. If it weren't for the people in the neighborhood talking about it, I wouldn't even know about it." The woman didn't know if she agreed with her husband's evaluation of the aunt, but she changed the topic back to her daughter. "If you ask me, I'd say that she doesn't know her place." However, to her husband, this wasn't a topic that could be discussed calmly. "The entertainment industry is so messy. That girl isn't a child anymore. Don't tell me she doesn't know this. If she really wanted to be a star, wouldn't she have told me? Even if I had to spend money, I would have given her a golden award for Best Newcomer. Look at you. It's because you're always trying to keep her by your side that she's doing this kind of thing without saying anything. This is called a rebellious period. Do you understand?" When the woman heard him say this, she glared at him and then reached out to poke him in the chest. "This old man, I'm warning you. When you see and her boyfriend later, you better have a better attitude. Don't scare them, understand? If you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten. I want to see which bastard dares to have ideas about my daughter. I'll break his third leg." At the mention of this, the middle-aged man gnashed his teeth in hatred. "How dare you? Even if you really find someone who isn't to your liking, you have to endure it for me. Otherwise, if things get out of hand and our daughter runs away because of your bad temper, do you believe that I won't pull out all your hair? Then let's see if the cabbage that we raised with great difficulty is eaten by a pig." The middle-aged man rolled his eyes gloomily. "If the other party's character isn't bad, then we'll observe. If the other party's character is problematic." The beautiful woman smiled, but this beautiful smile made the man shiver. This old lady's methods aren't to be trifled with. Although it couldn't be compared to a world-renowned giant like the Feigong Financial Group, Song Yu's family could still be considered to have a pretty big business. At least, including Jiang Jin, they still had some say in the Jiangsu, Zhejiang, and Shanghai region. And because this large corporation was developing too quickly, the hidden dangers left behind in the past began to show signs of being unable to be eliminated. It was the beautiful woman who took action and helped her husband secretly get rid of those parasites and people with ulterior motives in the corporation, allowing her husband to become the leader of the corporation. To her, a person with problematic character would definitely have a weakness. As long as she grasped this weakness, she could easily get rid of the parasites that were pestering her daughter. It wasn't worth worrying about at all, because he was very clear about his wife's ability. In the end, the man only snorted and didn't continue to refute. "We've already walked quite far. Haven't we arrived yet?" he asked with a gloomy face. "Who asked the city hall's little Wang to suddenly have something important to do and didn't come to pick us up? You didn't allow your daughter to pick you up, so we'll probably walk for another 10 minutes or so." Looks like the company's investment in Jiangjin will have to be reconsidered. All right, you're not a child anymore. Don't say such things in a fit of pique. Moreover, isn't it good to accompany me out for a walk once in a while? Just as the two of them were having a meaningless conversation while walking, a truck on the 4-lane road suddenly made a sharp turn to avoid a brat crossing the road. The load in the truck's back caused the truck's center of gravity to be affected. The entire truck tilted and charged straight towards the middle-aged couple on the sidewalk. Because it happened so suddenly, they didn't even have time to react. They could only stare blankly as the truck came crashing towards them. A loud bang reverberated across the road. The people in the surrounding shops were attracted by the sound and came out to watch the scene of the accident. "Are you guys all right?" A somewhat lazy voice finally brought the middle-aged man back to his senses. He found himself about 5 meters away from the scene of the accident. He subconsciously touched his body and looked around for his wife. When he found himself by his side, unharmed, he breathed a sigh of relief. But immediately a question occupied his mind. My wife and I were clearly at the place where the truck was about to hit. How did we end up here then? His attention fell on the person who spoke just now. The other person was a young man, about 20 years old. He had a sparse hedgehog head that made the middle-aged man sympathize with him. He had a tired expression on his face, as if he hadn't woken up yet. Although his clothes were clean, the color scheme of his clothes was somewhat terrible. It was most likely cheap goods from a street stall. But for some reason, the middle-aged man, who was confident in his own judgment, felt that he couldn't understand the young man in front of him. After hesitating for a moment, he asked, "Little brother, did you save me and my wife?" "It's just a matter of convenience." The other person waved his hand and pointed to the side. "Look, I even saved the truck driver." The middle-aged man followed his finger and saw a man in a worker's outfit sitting next to him. "But at that time, how did you do it? At that moment, how did you bring the three of them so far away?" The middle-aged man was still full of doubts. "Ah, yeah. It was that. What was it? Fire force? Adrenaline? In short, it's something like that." The young man seemed to be troubled as he scratched his head. "Look, aren't there people who can exert a lot of power in times of danger?" After that, the young man didn't seem to want to continue this conversation. He quickly walked to a small sheep next to him and got on it, intending to leave. "Wait a minute, little brother. Can you tell me your name? You saved my life. I still have to repay you." The middle-aged man wanted to stop him. "Don't worry. If everyone I save is like you, then I'll be busy." The young man started the electric scooter. Seeing that the middle-aged man didn't seem to want to give up, he continued, "Just think of me as an ordinary person passing by to buy groceries." After that, he sped away, leaving the middle-aged man with an ordinary back view. Chapter 565. Let's rewind time to half an hour ago at Sakura apartment. Can you repeat your request? Su Xinqing had an incredulous look on his face. He dug his ears and then asked the girl in front of him, "I think I heard wrong. Please be my boyfriend. I refuse." Old Su shook his head without thinking. Then he looked at Song Yu suspiciously and asked with concern, "Did something happen to you?" After all, Old Su rejected the girl's confession not long ago. Judging from Song Yu's mature behavior, the girl was not someone who would rashly do something that was bound to fail. "No, I mean." Song Yu blushed under Su Xinqing's gaze and said evasively, "My parents are coming to Jiangjin. While they're here, can you pretend to be my boyfriend?" "I see. Simply put, you're a shield, right?" Su Xinqing showed an expression of sudden realization. After all, this kind of plot often appeared in urban web novels. Su Xinqing was not unfamiliar with it. If it was the kind of fake boyfriend that was purely to attract the attention of the crazy bees and butterflies pursuing the female protagonist, Su Xinqing would also be a little disgusted. Although Su Xinqing was almost not afraid of anyone in this world, it did not mean that he liked to live a troublesome life. Otherwise, he had many ways to do something big, and even conquering the world would not be a delusion. But from Song Yu's description, this fake boyfriend's duty seemed to be to help her deal with her parents. He did not need to pretend for too long. In addition, Song Yu was always doing her best for Sakura apartment. If he did not help her with this small matter, Su Xinqing would not be able to get over it. Seeing Su Xinqing's frown, Song Yu's eyes, which originally revealed some hope, gradually dimmed. She tried to restrain her sad expression, forced a smile, and comforted Su Xinqing. "It's okay. You don't have to care so much. It's not a serious matter. At most, I'll confess to my parents that I'm just lying. It'll be over after I get scolded, right?" From the beginning to the end, the girl did not think about finding another boy to pretend to be her boyfriend. With her appearance and reputation, as long as she leaked the news, there would be a lot of people who would be willing to pretend to be her boyfriend. That kind of smile was so bitter. Even with Old Su's heart of stone, he could not help but feel a little heartache. "I know." He sighed deeply and said, Let's do it then. Do what? The girl was confused. Didn't you say so? Su Xinxing gave her a thumbs up and grinned. His teeth seemed to sparkle. Boyfriend and girlfriend fake. His tone was rather comical. In fact, Su Xinxing also intended to use this kind of playful words and actions to lighten the atmosphere. In the past, this method had been tried and tested time and time again, but the effect this time was completely different from before. Song Yu, who stood there like a sculpture, did not respond. After a while, big drops of tears oozed out of the girl's eyes like pearls, sliding down her white face. Hey, was I too frivolous? Su Xinxing suddenly felt a little lost. I am sorry. Song Yu sniffled and wiped the tears on her face with her sleeve, but the more she wiped, the more tears she shed. I don't know why. I'm obviously very happy, but my tears keep flowing. Although the tears kept flowing, the girl's face did not show any sadness. Instead, it was a kind of indescribable, as if the bitterness was over and the sweetness was coming, as if her past efforts were being rewarded, so slightly relaxed and moved with joy. Su Xinxing felt that his memory seemed to be touched. In the distant past, there seemed to be a girl who had shown him such an expression. When he came back to his senses, Su Xinxing found that he had already touched Song Yu's cheek. Careful. The girl seemed to be a little nervous and closed her eyes. Her lips were dark red, and her eyelashes with tears seemed to be more slender than before, making people's hearts beat faster. But the one in front of him was not the one who had already passed away. Su Xinxing felt empty in his heart. When she, who had made a vow to the 3 moons of Auravia, died suddenly, he did not feel sad, but only endless emptiness and confusion. But at this moment, he began to feel that something in his chest seemed to be clenched, and it was throbbing with pain. It turns out that it's not that I don't feel sad, but that I simply can't accept her departure, and even the feeling of sadness has numbed me. Only now do I feel the pain. Isn't the reaction arc too long? While mocking himself in his heart, Su Xinxing let go of the hand that was stroking the girl's face. Song Yu slowly opened her eyes, and there was a trace of imperceptible disappointment in her eyes. Sorry. Fortunately, old Su was also a person who had experienced great storms and waves, and his self-control was still very good. After pulling himself out of the pain, Su Xinxing smiled bitterly and apologized to the girl. The girl shook her head. I should apologize to you. It's obviously such an unreasonable request. So what should I do? Just wait for your parents to arrive and pretend? Su Xinxing, who did not want to be bound by this atmosphere, immediately changed the topic to a more substantive issue. Sure enough, Song Yu's attention was fully attracted by his question, and she began to think hard. According to my parents' style, when they called me, they were most likely already on their way here. Then the girl said with a serious face, I need to clean the house. My mother is a bit of a clean freak. Recently, I have been at an apartment, and the hygiene of the house is a bit neglected. Xinxing, can you go buy some groceries? I plan to finish dinner before they arrive. Oh, leave it to me. Su Xinxing had no objection to this. Also, this is the spare key to my apartment. Take it, and open the door yourself. Seeing that Su Xinxing did not object, the girl immediately took out a security key from her pocket. Why do you carry a spare key with you? Su Xinxing asked curiously. In case of emergency. The girl was silent for a moment, then she answered vaguely. Although Su Xinxing still wanted to ask what a rainy day meant, he wisely didn't continue to ask. Chapter 566. In the summer of 1997, the American National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, detected a strange ultra-low-frequency deep-sea sound signal in the South Pacific Ocean. Unlike the long-established Celestial Empire and other ancient civilizations, the United States focused on scientific and technological development in the last century and was late in investing in supernatural research. Therefore, American experts at the time only thought that the sound came from a creature. Coupled with the fact that several hydrophone arrays thousands of miles away had observed the strange sound, they speculated that the creature was huge. However, Many people thought that the research conclusion was too ridiculous and ignored it. At that time, the American researchers did not pay too much attention to the results of this research, and it even leaked to the outside world. It was called the bloop by the busybodies, and it was talked about by many mysticism and humor enthusiasts. However, not long after, the American National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration began to keep the matter a secret, and similar observations never appeared again. This was very unusual because the migration of large groups of whales in the ocean, the chain eruption of underwater volcanoes, and the movement of oceanic crustal plates could all cause similar sound signals. However, Noah seemed to have forgotten about the bloop and never mentioned it again. The reason was not complicated. The original speculation of the researcher was correct. In the South Pacific Ocean, there was a super creature that humans could not imagine. It was estimated to be more than 2,000 kilometers long and was speculated to be some kind of marine arthropod supergiant creature. As early as ancient times, human sorcerers had confirmed the existence of the creature and knew that it was a super creature that could easily destroy a civilization. In the Ugaritic epics, it was called Litan. In the book of Isaiah, it was called Rahab the sea monster. In some ancient cities on the Mediterranean coast, it was called Laden, but it also had a most well-known name. In the Hebrew Bible, it was called the Leviathan. Humans knew almost nothing about the food source, living conditions, life cycle, and other habits of the Leviathan. Currently, some supernatural scholars believed that the Malvinas Islands at the southern tip of South America were actually the dormant Leviathan. The earthquakes around the islands about once every 3 months were the breathing of the Leviathan. But unfortunately, this was not true. Because you like to stay in the depths of the ocean more than places close to land, at this time, meteorologists around the world would be scratching their heads over the strange sudden airflow in the center of the South Pacific. The huge cyclone created a spiral of clouds, so much so that even observational satellites could not capture the scene there. Fortunately, this was the case. Otherwise, those normal people who didn't know about the other side of the world would definitely be shocked by the scene that appeared there. The center of the Pacific Ocean, which had an average depth of more than 4,500 meters, seemed to have been cut open by some kind of sharp weapon at this moment. A crack so deep that the seabed could be seen appeared in the ocean. The thick water walls on both sides existed in a state that defied the common sense of physics and did not close for a long time. At the edge of the crack, one could see half of a huge creature's head. It was a rather handsome half-head that looked like a giant dragon from the legends. Most of the head's owner's body was still submerged in the sea. It was just using its pair of pitch-black, huge eyes that were unknown, whether they were compound eyes or some other structure, to stare at the tiny creature that was no different from a speck of dust to it. No matter how many times I see it, it's still shockingly big. Even the 99-headed giant dragon and the kraken dragon of the Great Devil realm can't compare to you in terms of size. In fact, when Su Xinxing first learned that such a creature existed on Earth, he was also shocked. This was too different from what he knew about Earth before he transmigrated. Moreover, this guy in front of him was only an Earth creature after all. Compared to some of the cosmic creatures in Centaurus that could travel through the universe, it was still much smaller, and its personality was not as fierce. Although I can't eat seafood, Song Yu's parents rarely come to Jiangjin, so I have to treat them to something special. Su Xinxing stopped his little sheep on the coral reef next to him, then looked directly at the Leviathan. So it's okay to take some meat from you, right? Anyway, your body is so big, so you won't feel anything, right? Most creatures had some commonalities. The bigger their body, the lower their vigilance when facing the same kind of enemy. Just like how cats would be afraid when they see a vicious dog, humans would be vigilant when they see a vicious dog, and elephants would just ignore it when they see a vicious dog. Based on the Leviathan's body size, in all of Earth and its affiliated spaces, except for Bichimos and Skiz, the legendary giant bird that was said to be as tall as the ground to heaven, and could cover the sun when it spread its wings. If the Leviathan was the king of the ocean, Bichimos was the king of the earth, and Skiz was the king of the sky. Only monsters at the level of Typhon could make it vigilant. But today was different. Although the Leviathan was clearly just an insignificant human, it had never felt such intense vigilance since its birth. The vigilance that almost filled its huge body gathered together and finally led to a fear that went deep into its brain. This kind of fear even made the Leviathan not dare to move. It could only watch helplessly as the other party dug out a piece of meat from its body. Although to it, that piece of meat the size of a soup bowl really didn't hurt or itch. After the other party left, the two walls of the sea collapsed as if they had discussed it beforehand. A large amount of seawater poured in, and finally formed a huge whirlpool, and gave birth to a new SSR typhoon, which gave America a big surprise. But this is a story for another time, so let's skip it for now. I'm back. Is that right? After opening the apartment's security door with the spare key given by the girl, Su Xinqing hesitantly stuck his head out and said, "Welcome back." The girl in an apron walked out of the kitchen and asked Su Xinqing with a smile, "What did you buy?" "Baby cabbage, potatoes, tomatoes, eggs, enoki mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms, tofu, and mantis shrimp meat." Hearing this, Su Xinqing looked down and counted the plastic bags before answering. "Why is the last sentence a question?" The girl asked strangely. "Of course it's because I don't know if a Leviathan can be considered a mantis shrimp," Su Xinqing answered in his heart. Chapter 567. By the way, why is the only meat dish mantis shrimp? Song Yu sighed and complained in the kitchen. Of course, it's because the price of meat has risen recently. Su Xinqing muttered in his heart. And is this really the meat of a mantis shrimp? Song Yu poked the whole piece of meat that was a little smaller than a wash basin in the bag and raised her delicate eyebrows, her face full of doubt. "Well, it should be." Su Xinqing's eyes drifted up and he answered uncertainly. "What do you mean by should be? Isn't this what you brought back?" The girl's expression became even more suspicious. "If I have to say, it's probably a close relative of mantis shrimp. Anyway, it should be edible." Su Xinqing answered cautiously. In the Bible, Leviathan, bichimos, and skis were, in a sense, emergency food prepared by God for people who had survived Judgment Day. So if Leviathan was really the one recorded in the Bible, then theoretically, it should be edible. But what should I do? Song Yu looked at the piece of meat in distress. "We can't really boil it in salt water like the mantis shrimp, right?" Su Xinqing shrugged, indicating that he couldn't help, because this guy hadn't eaten much seafood in his life. Although seafood allergy was a factor, the main reason was that he was poor before the girl could figure out what to do. The piece of meat suddenly squirmed. She put down the kitchen knife, rubbed her eyes, and then looked at the piece of meat again. "That, Xinqing, are you sure this thing is dead?" "Of course," Su Xinqing, who was eating oranges in the living room, answered vaguely. This was just a piece of meat that was cut off from a Leviathan. According to the ratio, if the Leviathan was a human, this bit of meat wouldn't even be considered a chicken's eye. Do you expect a chicken's eye to have a knee-jerk reaction or what? But just as he finished speaking, the piece of meat twitched again. So even Su Xinqing looked over curiously. The next moment, a creature that looked like a miniature version of a facehugger jumped out of meat and rushed towards Song Yu's face. The girl was so scared that her face turned pale. Almost at the same time, Su Xinqing also reacted at an amazing speed and threw the orange peel in his hand directly at the insect. Not sure if it felt the destructive power of the orange peel, which was more powerful than bullets. At that moment, the facehugger sacrificed its tail at the critical moment and allowed itself to be bounced to the ceiling. As for the orange peel, it sank into the wall. After almost being killed, the facehugger stopped attacking Song Yu. Instead, it quickly moved around the ceiling as if it wanted to escape as soon as possible. "TSK, there are actually parasites in the meat? How long has it been since Leviathan bathed?" Su Xinqing clicked his tongue and said unhappily after his attack missed. "Wait, what did you say this thing's meat is?" Song Yu, who had just regained his senses, turned pale with fright once again. "I'll get rid of the insect." Su Xinqing immediately wanted to brush him off. In the end, before the bug could escape to the door or the window, it was caught by a small hand and stuffed into the mouth, with a sound. Crunch, 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 the bug was eaten. After Emoli finished eating the worm expressionlessly, he frowned and stuck out his tongue. Mr. Landlord, it's not delicious at all. It would be strange if that kind of thing was delicious. It doesn't look like a crab at all. Don't mistake all marine arthropods for crab-flavored. Crack, crack, crack. Speak. That's because of the exoskeleton. It smells like a treasure chest monster. Hey, have we eaten a treasure chest monster before? No, that's not the point. Su Xinqing looked at Emoli helplessly. When did you get here? Because they would have to face Song Yu's parents later, in order to prevent Emoli from causing trouble. Old Su specially left the little guy at Sakura apartment. In the end, she still managed to find her way over. Just now, I want to eat the Leviathan too. As soon as she said this, there was a huge turbulence in the sea near the South Pacific Ocean, once again forming a typhoon that attacked the innocent and pitiful Marika. Emoli, think about it carefully. If you eat the Leviathan in one go, you won't be able to eat it in the future. If you only take a little bit of meat like now, it can grow back in the future. This is an endless supply of meat, isn't it? Su Xinqing began to guide Emoli patiently. Emoli's little face suddenly showed an expression that said, "There's such a thing." As a matter of fact, compared to Leviathan, perhaps Bichimos and Skiz tasted better. But the problem was that these two fellows were not on Earth, but in the subspace near Earth. Relying on old Su's dregs of perception, there was really no way he could find these two spare grains to eat. Although it wasn't impossible to search for them by randomly swiping at the subspace, it would be a disaster if he accidentally swiped at the flood. Instead of talking nonsense with Emoli, Xinqing, can you send her back to Sakura apartment first? My parents seem to be arriving soon. I feel that it will be very troublesome to explain when they arrive. Song Yu, who had finally calmed down, used a knife to stab the meat twice. When she did not find any other parasites, she shouted at Su Xinqing. That's true. Su Xinqing was not the kind of person who liked to communicate with people. Usually, he would use the simplest and most direct method to solve problems. However, he obviously could not rely on physics to solve the problem as usual. After all, even if he was just pretending to be her boyfriend, beating up the girl's parents was a little too much. Just as Su Xinqing was about to take Emoli back to Sakura apartment by her collar, the doorbell suddenly rang. Song Yu's face showed a bewildered expression that said, "It can't be that fast?" After a moment of consideration, Su Xinqing took the lead to put down Emoli, walked to the door, and opened it. In the end, the two people outside the door appeared in front of him. "It's you." The middle-aged man outside the door immediately showed a surprised expression when he saw Su Xinqing. "Aya, could it be that you are his boyfriend?" The beautiful middle-aged woman looked into the room. The man who looked like Song Yu's father blushed. It seemed that he wanted to show his strength to his daughter's boyfriend, but he did not expect that the other party was actually the young man who saved them. As a result, this anger was stuck in his throat. He did not know whether to swallow it or spit it out. He looked like a hippopotamus. Then, he saw Emoli, who was sitting on the sofa, shaking her legs and seriously peeling an orange. He was immediately shocked. "Not only are you living together, you even have a goddamn daughter." Chapter 568. Well, in other words, after a period of chaos, the visiting middle-aged couple finally calmed down. The middle-aged man, who was Song Yu's father, Song Chung, was sitting at the dining table with his eyes closed. His fingers were intertwined as he propped his chin up. He spoke in a deep voice, full of the aura of a commander. "You've been isolated from the world since you were a child. You've been practicing martial arts with a hermit expert. Then, you came to the city with your sister, because you unintentionally helped my you. The two of you gradually got together?" "Yes, that's right." Su Xinqing tried his best to put on a serious expression as he answered, but in fact, he was a little nervous. After all, he had gone overboard with his nonsense this time. He could tell just by looking at the middle-aged man's "You're King kidding me" expression. Sure enough, this somewhat outdated urban web novel adventure could not fool the middle-aged man. If not for the fact that the middle-aged man probably knew that he was no match for him, and that he was the benefactor of the couple, he would have shouted something like, "2nd Battalion Commander, where's my Italian cannon?" and the like to fight him to the death. So that's how it is. No wonder you're so skilled. Song Yu's mother showed a gentle smile. Instantly, Su Shenqing and Song Qing showed, "What the F***ck? You actually believed that expression." However, Su Shenqing immediately returned to his upright and still posture. Song Cheng's expression changed. His whole body trembled a few times before he looked away. Although Song Yu's wife was very discreet, even old Su would not miss their actions when they were so close to each other. She pinched her husband's thigh so hard that Song Yu's father did not scream out loud. It was enough to show that he was a man with extraordinary willpower, of course. Perhaps his wife had already trained him to be so. Then Shenxing, "Is it okay if I call you the same as you?" Mrs. Song continued to speak with a gentle smile. It was impossible to tell that she had just done something ruthless to her husband. Su Shenxing couldn't help but tremble. Then he forced a smile and said, "Of course, no problem." At the same time, he asked Mo Li for help through the telepathic link, hoping that the little rascal could break the stalemate and temporarily distract the other party's attention. Anyway, with her appearance and age, no matter what she said or did, it was within the scope of forgiveness. That was why naughty children were so hateful. Thus, Mo Li, who had been leisurely eating oranges, suddenly stood up. Her actions immediately attracted the attention of Song Yu's parents. "I want to watch TV," Yu said. Then, the little fellow ran to the living room like a wisp of smoke. Su Shenxing could only cry out in his heart, "Don't leave me behind, ah!" In the end, Su Shenxing, who was abandoned by Mo Li, could only brace himself and continue to confront his fake future father-in-law and mother-in-law. "I heard from you, or that you've only known her for less than a year. I believe that the two of you only have a preliminary understanding of each other." After Emoli left, the mother-in-law seemed to have found her rhythm and continued to chat with Su Shenxing. "Then, can I hear your opinion on Yua?" Although Song Yu was still in the kitchen, Su Shenxing could guarantee that the girl was definitely listening in on this topic. The possibility of her interrupting the conversation and saving him was basically impossible. As for Yua, she's very smart and capable, kind and gentle, virtuous and considerate. She's also beautiful and can cook very well. If she becomes your wife, she'll definitely be a very good helper. Thus, Su Shenxing could only choose to say good things. What a glib tongue. How did I not know that my daughter was so good? Song Cheng's father interjected as if in a fit of pique. Immediately, a clang sound was heard from the kitchen. It was unknown what Song Yu was knocking on to express her dissatisfaction. Song Yu's father was also punished. He was hit by his wife's 9-inch white bone claw again. Looking at the extent of his face turning green, the power of this attack was probably 30% stronger than the previous one. So cautious, do you really think that you and you are a good match? I don't have any prejudice against family backgrounds, but marriage is a matter between two people. If their living conditions were as different as heaven and earth from a young age, naturally their outlook on life and values would also be different. Even if they were attracted to each other for some reason, after marriage, they would have to spend decades together. If they forcefully put different values together, would there really be happiness? In the end, Mrs. Song revealed her true intentions. Whether it's the prince and Cinderella, or the princess and Aladdin, they're all just fairy tales. I don't want you to get hurt and come back crying to me one day, saying that fairy tales are all lies. If it was a heartless person, they would probably laugh out loud at Mrs. Song's last witty remark. However, Su Shenxing just kept silent. Mrs. Song's words were very obvious. She was obviously referring to the next line of the song. You can't be her prince. Although Su Shenxing was indeed a great hero who saved the world, a great sinner who destroyed the world, a great traveler who transcended time and space, it could be said that he was an existence that was superior to all things. However, when it came to relationships, it was really difficult for him to say anything. After all, his relationships were the type that went beyond common sense, and from the results, almost none of them had a perfect ending. Even if he knew that he should refute now, or else he would be completely overwhelmed by the other party. He didn't know how to refute. Naturally, he couldn't use fallacious reasoning, because he knew very well that Mrs. Song really cared about Song Yu and her daughter. That was why she said these things to him earnestly. Therefore, it was absolutely impossible to rely on fallacious reasoning to deceive her. To be honest, I don't know what love is, but I feel very happy and comfortable when I get along with Song Yu. If it's possible, I want to continue living with her. In the end, Su Xinxing could only bitterly smile and dryly reply, I don't know if this is considered love, but I hope that she can continue to stay by my side. Opposite him, Song Yu's father wanted to say something, but was interrupted by a bowl of soup placed on the table. It's time to eat. If there's anything, wait until after the meal. Song Yu, who was wearing an apron, said to her father decisively. Then the girl looked at Su Xinxing. Her eyes were as gentle as water. Chapter 569. Although Song Yu was there as a buffer, the atmosphere of the dinner was still quite bad. Other than Mo Li, who could completely ignore that kind of low pressure, no one at the table could eat properly. After all, the relationship between Song Yu and her parents wasn't that good. Sorry, Xinxing, to let you encounter such a terrible thing. After sending her parents off, Song Yu made a cup of tea for Su Xinxing and a cup of warm milk for Mo Li. During dinner just now, Song Yu's father, Song Chung, had been making trouble for no reason. He picked on Su Xinxing and even criticized him for eating a few more pieces of fried chicken. To be honest, Su Xinxing's temper wasn't that bad, but even if he was in that situation just now, if the other party wasn't Song Yu's father, he would have flipped the table. In the end, even the usually patient Song Yu couldn't help but get angry and shouted, "Don't interfere in my life anymore." Although at that moment, the Song family couple revealed extremely sorrowful expressions, and Song Yu's father looked as if he had aged several years in an instant. His vitality had declined a lot, and he looked extremely pitiful. However, from a certain perspective, it could be said that he reaped what he sowed. This directly led to the two parties parting on bad terms after dinner. Song Yu's parents also silently left. I'm fine. Although Su Xinxing showed a physically and mentally exhausted look, he still waved his hand. But your parents came all the way here. Is it really okay to not let them stay for 2 days before leaving? It's okay. Who told them to be so tactless? I've already made it so obvious. The girl couldn't help but mutter as she spoke. Although he wasn't sure what the other party meant by obvious, Su Xinxing still felt that it was better for him not to delve too deeply into it. Aside from Mo Li, who was sipping warm milk, Su Xinxing and Song Yu both fell silent. They absent-mindedly watched the boring variety show held by Jiang Jin's local TV station. Actually, my dad wasn't like that before. After an unknown period of time, the girl suddenly began to talk about her past. When I was very young, my father was an omnipotent hero in my heart. He cared a lot about me and my mother, and our family lived a very happy life. However, as my father's business grew bigger and bigger, his desire to control gradually grew stronger. He would take care of everything in the company himself, but to put it bluntly, he would not let go of his power. At home, he also wanted to take care of everything, from buying a car and a house to placing the brooms. Other than my mother, no one at home or in the company can go against his wishes. I'm very annoyed that he wants to dictate everything. So when I was filling in the application form, I applied for a university in Jiangjin without telling him. When he found out the truth, he was so angry and anxious. I don't know why, but I feel very happy. It's probably the thrill of revenge. Even though there was a smile on her face during her narration, in the end, the girl's expression turned gloomy and depressed. In my parents' eyes, I must be a bad child. I always go against their wishes and only do what I want to do. You can't say that. Su Xinxing couldn't help but say. Careful. If it's just this, I think it's much better than those guys who smoke, drink, have tattoos, and call themselves good girls. I always feel that the people you use to compare me with are too extreme, Song Yu said with a straight face, but then she couldn't help but burst out laughing. Moreover, Rather than the thrill of revenge, I think your behavior is more like a child who wants to use pranks to attract their parents' attention. Su Shinshin continued. Huh. Song Yu was stunned. Didn't you say it yourself? Your father used to care a lot about you. In other words, isn't it because your father doesn't care enough about you now, so you're angry? Su Shinshin continued. This is just a sophistry of biting words. I can't wait for him to leave me alone. Song Yu pouted and complained. The desire to control and care are not the same. In fact, you love your parents very much, right? When they were hurt by your words, you clearly showed an apologetic and heartbroken expression because of your slip of the tongue. Although it was only for a moment, it didn't escape my eyes. Not confused by the girl's complaints, Su Shinshin stated the basis of his speculation. So Song Yu showed a speechless expression. Then the girl sighed. Okay. Even if that's the case, I can't chase them back. And I can tolerate other people. But they are the only ones who oppose me and, well, in short, this time I will never forgive them. Song Yu said angrily like a little girl. Now we have an urgent news. At this moment, the variety show on the TV screen suddenly disappeared and was replaced by the female news anchor from the local channel, who was not as beautiful as Song Yu and Qin Xingyan. But because it appeared too suddenly, Su Shinshin and Song Yu's attention was attracted. The National Bank near Mingqing Road in the city was attacked by unidentified terrorists. Currently, more than 180 hostages, including bank staff, are in a standoff with the police. We will continue to follow the situation and report the situation. Dad, Mom. Song Yu stared blankly at the slightly poor quality video, which was probably shot by a cell phone. The hostages were detained by the criminals, and she was suddenly stunned. Then her face became pale at a speed visible to the naked eye. Her parents were also among the hostages. The next moment, she stood up and ran out of the house without thinking. But Su Shinshin grabbed her. What do you want to do? Su Shinshin asked. Of course I want to save my parents. Song Yu said subconsciously. With your current state, let alone saving people, I'm afraid you can't even squeeze through the onlookers. Su Shinshin sighed. Then what should I do? Right, Shinshin. Shinshin, you have to help me. Save my parents. The girl, who finally came back to her senses, stared at Su Shinshin in a daze. A moment later, tears streamed down her cheeks. When I think that the last words I said to my parents might be those words of a tantrum, I feel so bad that I want to die. No problem. Seeing that the girl finally calmed down, Su Shinshin let go of her hand. He walked to the window. Molly, get ready to work. It's not good to do strenuous exercise after a meal. And Molly answered lazily from a sofa. Don't tell me you don't want to eat the food that Miss Song Yu makes for you in the future. Molly, let's go. Molly immediately jumped up from the sofa in a movement that couldn't be seen by the naked eye. Seeing that Molly was also motivated, Su Shinshin turned around and gave Song Yu a smile. Don't worry, I'm here. Chapter 570. It's rare for me to be this unlucky, right? In the bank building that was held hostage by unknown criminals, Xiao Jingyi sighed helplessly among the group of hostages and muttered to himself. As the saying goes, it takes 100 days to recover from a serious injury. Xiao Jingyi's miserable state when he was sent to the hospital was far beyond the scope of a serious injury. It was almost to the extent that after the emergency treatment, the doctor would helplessly say to the family members, "We tried our best, but whether he can wake up is still a problem." In theory, even if he could be cured, he would not be able to leave the hospital for 3 to 5 months. But unexpectedly, after 2 days, not only did Xiao Jingyi wake up, but his injuries also recovered quickly, as if he was slapping the face of the medical world. Now, except for the fracture of his arm, his ankle, and his limping, his other injuries were almost healed. The reason for this was not only because Xiao Jingyi's body had been improved by bathing in the aura, but also because Su Shinshin secretly gave him the holy elixir he brought from Auravaya when he visited. After transmigrating to this world, the holy elixir wasn't like in Auravaya. As long as the person died for less than 10 minutes, the person's soul hadn't dissipated, and the person's body was at least 2/3 intact. The holy elixir could still be used as a common potion to speed up the body's recovery. Originally, this could be considered a good thing. After all, no one wanted to be tied up like a mummy and lie motionless in the hospital for several months. What was the difference between that and a salted fish? But when Xiao Jingyi had just recovered, the hospital bill was also sent over. This guy was a hedonistic moonlight clan, so naturally, he could not pay back the large amount of medical expenses in a short period of time. In addition, Fang Xiaoqing had temporarily left Jiangjin because of family matters. Like Su Shenqing, Xiao Zhengyi, who was slightly male chauvinistic, naturally could not make a phone call and ask his girlfriend to send him money, right? In the end, Xiao Zhengyi simply called Su Feng. He felt that his injury this time should be considered a work injury, so it should be no problem to write it off. Fortunately, Su Feng was a good boss. Hearing him speak until he was about to cry, he transferred the money to his bank card without saying a word. However, when it rains, it pours. There was a problem with the hospital's online settlement technology, so it was temporarily suspended and only accepted cash. This made Xiao Jingyi have to walk with his arm in a sling and run to the bank near the hospital to withdraw money. Then, he and the group of onlookers were blocked here and became hostages. To encounter this kind of thing, when he came out to withdraw money, he was really too unlucky. Xiao Jingyi wanted to cry. What gave him the biggest headache was that his gun and Yuan Rong sword were both left in the hospital and not with him. Other than the 50-cent bracelet plus 2 foot on his hand and the fact that his HP was slightly higher than the average person, he was no different from the average person. The gangsters vigilantly patrolled around the hostages. Xiao Jingyi also took this opportunity to learn about the other party's equipment. The more he looked, the more frightened he became. Almost every gangster had an AK-47 in their hands and a pistol of unknown model on their waists. A few of the bandits even had heavy weapons, such as rocket launchers, in their hands. It would cost a lot to get these things in China, where the management of firearms was extremely strict. Xiao Jingyi always felt that it was not worth it to rob a bank just for that. The bulging tactical vests of these guys were probably filled with ammunition for resupply. There was an 80% chance that they were wearing bulletproof vests under their tactical vests. In addition, they seemed to have prepared a lot of things such as gas masks, infrared scopes, communication devices, and spare daggers. If it was a surprise attack and a one-on-one fight, Xiao Jingyi was confident that he could take down 1 or 2 of them, even if his hands and feet were injured. However, the number of gangsters was not small. He was afraid that once he was exposed, he would immediately be shot into a sieve by a hail of bullets. Oh, isn't this Mr. Song and Mrs. Song? Suddenly, a gangster with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks recognized Song Chung and his wife in the crowd. He grabbed Song Cheng's collar and pulled Song Chung, who was a size bigger than him, out of the crowd of hostages. Seeing this slightly comical scene, Xiao Jingyi's eyes became more and more serious. "I keep feeling that something is wrong," he whispered to himself. At this time, Song Yu's mother rushed over as if she wanted to snatch her husband back. However, she was knocked to the ground by the protruding mouth and monkey-like face guy with the butt of his gun. "Our boss is negotiating with the police. Mr. Song, you happen to look familiar, so we'll let you be the first hostage." Then he turned to look at Mrs. Song, who still hadn't recovered from the shock, and said, "As the saying goes, the government will most likely not agree to our first request. In other words, your husband is dead meat for sure. But it doesn't matter, because it will soon be your turn to be the second hostage. Let's get you to accompany your husband as soon as possible. After we kill the 2 of you, the other side should be able to understand that what we are doing this time is not just for fun. They will seriously consider our request. Wait a minute." At this time, Xiao Jingyi suddenly shouted. The protruding mouth and monkey-like face guy's slender eyes revealed a trace of coldness. He looked at Xiao Jingyi, who dared to speak against him. However, when he saw the bandages on his feet and the plaster on his hands, he immediately laughed disdainfully. "What? You're not satisfied with my allocation? Why would I be? I just think that it's a waste to take an old man with poor health as a hostage. If the hostage dies before the negotiation is finished, wouldn't it be a waste? Why don't you take me as a hostage? My body is strong and can withstand the torment. You see, it's fine even if my arms and legs are broken. Xiao Jingyi tried hard to show a flattering expression on his face. Of course, he was also afraid of death. However, when the two people he had never met before were about to die as hostages destined to be killed, he couldn't help but stand up. He didn't want to be a hero or anything. It was just that deep sense of justice in his heart. Otherwise, he wouldn't have investigated the car theft case alone with the identity of a small police officer and risked defending some people he shouldn't have. Well said. The protruding mouth and monkey-like face, Guy first showed an expression of appreciation, but the next moment, his expression became ferocious. But it's useless. Since you dare to disobey my decision, you should be mentally prepared. As he spoke, he aimed the muzzle in his hand at Xiao Jingyi and shot a fatal bullet. However, at this moment, a hand blocked in front of Xiao Jingyi. The bullet that should have blown his head off didn't even graze the oily skin of the hand and was bounced off just like that. What? The protruding mouth and monkey-like face, Guy's eyes were full of shock. Xiao Jingyi breathed a sigh of relief. You're finally here. And well done. The corners of old Su's mouth curled up slightly. Then he turned his gaze to the other side. Leave the rest to me. Chapter 571. Although the bandits couldn't do any harm to Su Xinqing at all, and didn't even have the qualifications to make him slightly alert, Song Yu's parents were also present. Even if Xiao Jingyi later contacted the super administrative office to manipulate the memory of the witnesses, old Su couldn't go too far. While Su Xinqing was still distressed over how to take down the other party wasn't moved by his painstaking efforts. The guy with the protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks pulled the trigger and fired directly at Su Xinqing. In order to prevent the bullets from ricocheting and injuring the hostages behind, Su Xinqing naturally couldn't dodge these bullets. Instead, he used his own reaction and speed to block all the bullets that were much slower than a snail to him. Ignoring Xiao Jingyi's expression of "this is already very excessive," Su Xinqing showed a mocking smile at the guy with the protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks. Then he opened his hands, and the bullets that were blocked by him fell to the ground with tinkling sounds. The scene suddenly broke through the sky. Then he gave a thumbs up and grinned. Chinese Kung Fu. The group of hostages behind him, including the foreigners, showed an expression of "so that's how it is." Only Xiao Jingyi, who knew the inside story, was still madly complaining in his heart. Normal Kung Fu can't do this to you. At this time, the color of the glass wall outside the bank, which had been blocked by the bandits with various obstacles to prevent snipers, suddenly darkened a little. But because the change wasn't big, no one except Su Xinqing noticed it. This meant that Li had also made a move. The girl had used magic to modify the physical properties of the light in this area, so that people outside couldn't see the situation inside the bank. As for the original surveillance cameras in the bank, they had naturally been removed by the bandits. In fact, even if they hadn't removed them, Su Xinqing's appearance in this kind of video would just be a mosaic due to his mysterious nature. At this time, some more criminals gathered here, probably attracted by the sharp-mouthed man's gunshots. At the same time, the monkey-cheek guy realized that bullets couldn't hurt Su Xinqing, so he simply used the AK-47 in his hand as a crowbar and smashed it at Su Xinqing's head. Although his strength was very strong compared to ordinary people, it was not much different from an ant to Su Xinqing, who was a super existence. Su Xinqing deflected the opponent's attack with a light push. Then, he kicked the opponent away. The skinny man bounced a few times on the ground and smashed into a window at the back dedicated to buying foreign exchange. He smashed a hole in the bulletproof glass of the window, and his whole body was embedded in a horizontal U shape. Not good. It seems that I used too much strength. That guy is most likely dead. Although Su Xinqing tried his best to control his strength, he didn't expect that he would still be able to deliver a blow that was too fantastical compared to common sense. So he immediately made up for it and made the iconic pose of Huang Feihong in the movies. Chinese Kung Fu. Don't think that you can use this excuse to explain all unscientific phenomena. At this moment, He seemed to hear Xiao Jingyi not far away, shouting in his heart. In the end, the hostages all had an expression of "I see," or "Chinese Kung Fu is amazing." Xiao Jingyi was speechless as he muttered to himself, "What the F***CK? How could this be?" At this time, the sharp-mouthed man embedded in the bulletproof glass began to move and struggle again, but because his posture and situation were too awkward, he probably wouldn't be able to get out for a while. At this point, even Su Shenqing felt that something was wrong. How could ordinary criminals be so resistant to attacks? Even if he didn't use more than 1/4 of his strength, it was enough to kill a human. After all, China wasn't the simple and honest Gotham City. Why would someone use violence to rob a bank? Wasn't this too suicidal? But if the robber wasn't a normal person, then it could be explained. In this world, there were always some people who, because of various fortuitous encounters, obtained extraordinary power, and felt that they were special, that they were destined to be above all others. When this inflated self-confidence turned into arrogance and evil, it wasn't surprising that they would do some unbelievable things. Thinking of this, Su Shenqing moved his eyes to the robbers who rushed over. Just like the guy with the protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks, those robbers were no different from ordinary people in terms of physique. They didn't look like the kind of people who had undergone considerable training, causing their muscles to be rather solid and burly. Their first reaction when they saw Su Shenqing was similar to the sharp-mouthed man's. They all raised their guns at him. A few of them even directly raised their rocket launchers. If they were unharmed by a rocket launcher, then it would be difficult to explain that they were Kung Fu. After all, even the legendary King Kong's invincible divine art couldn't protect their hair. Look at the movies and TV shows. People who practiced this kind of thing didn't have hair. Plus, old Su wanted to test his theory, so he simply rushed forward. Before the robbers could react, he kicked them one by one and stuffed them into the bulletproof glass of the counter window. In the end, although a few of them vomited blood and seemed to be seriously injured, none of them died. It seemed that the strength of their bodies was beyond the scope of a normal person. So they're really abnormal? This time, Xiao Jingyi could see some clues. Su Shenqing didn't comment and just nodded. Then he received the news that the other robbers had been taken care of by Mo Li through the telepathic link. Of course, the girl's method was a little different from Su Shenqing's. In the eyes of others, the robbers were simply immobilized due to various accidents. For example, one of them accidentally fell head first into a tropical fish tank, and then the electric light on the ceiling happened to fall off. The electric wire fell directly into the bathtub and electrocuted the robber. All in all, the scene was like the arrival of the Grim Reaper. When the police came in to clean up the mess later, they would probably think that the robbers were so unlucky that cold water would be stuck between their teeth. Mo Li caught the leader of the robbers. "I'll give you a big credit later," Su Shenqing whispered to Xiao Jingyi. The latter immediately showed a silly smile. After doing all this, Su Shenqing turned around and announced to the group of hostages that they had been successfully rescued. Immediately, the hostages cheered. Only Song Yu's parents stared at Su Shenqing strangely. After a period of calming down, they finally recovered from the great sorrow and joy of surviving a disaster. Su Shenqing didn't avoid their gaze. "What do you see in you, a person like you should be able to find more and more beautiful women with a wave of your hand, right?" Songqing asked seriously. Su Shenqing thought hard for a moment, then answered with uncertainty. "Her cooking skills." "That you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.